Tonight, we drift among the WULINGYUAN Quartz pillars, where cool mist beads on stone and the forest rises in quiet green shelves around you. Settle in, and let your breathing slow. The path beneath us feels damp and old, and the air carries the soft smell of moss, wet bark, and rain resting in narrow cracks. You can imagine the pillars ahead before you fully see them. They stand inside the haze like tall, silent shadows, their sides streaked with vines and small trees. WULINGYUAN feels strange because it is both mountain and forest, both cliff and column, both solid earth and something almost weightless. The stone seems to float upward, though we are only walking slowly below it. As we move deeper, the light becomes filtered and pale. It slips through leaves, breaks against the cliff faces, and settles in soft strips along the path. You hear water somewhere below, not rushing, just moving over stones with a patient sound. The whole landscape seems to breathe through the ravines, drawing mist upward and letting it drift between the towers. The WULINGYUAN Quartz pillars are not sharp in the way new stone can seem sharp. They have been softened by time. Rain has touched them again and again, falling into seams, sliding down faces, gathering at roots, and carrying away small grains of sand. What remains is the tallness, the patience, the strange vertical quiet of sandstone that refuse to disappear all at once. You walk with me beneath them, and there is no need to hurry. These pillars were not made for quick understanding. They were made by layers, by pressure, by weather, by water finding one small weakness after another. Their strangeness comes from the way ordinary things, repeated for millions of years, can become almost impossible to believe. The stone here began as sand, long before this misty forest grew over the valleys. Grain by grain, it settled in an ancient environment where rivers and shallow waters laid down beds of quartz-rich sediment. Over time, those grains were pressed together and cemented until loose sand became quartz sandstone, firm enough to hold a cliff, yet still carrying the memory of all those tiny particles. If you could place your hand against one pillar, you might feel roughness under your palm. Not glassy, not polished, just a fine granular texture, like a stone that remembers being a shore or riverbed. The surface is cool in the shade, damp in the morning air, and sometimes darkened by the slow touch of water running down from above. This is one of the first reasons WULINGYUAN feels so unusual. The pillars are made mostly of quartz sandstone, a rock that resists weathering better than softer layers around it. Quartz is stubborn in a quiet way. It does not easily dissolve. It does not vanish quickly under rain. So when the landscape is lifted, fractured and open to weather, the stronger parts remain standing longer. You can feel that persistence in the shape of the place. The valleys have deepened, the slopes have retreated, and yet these columns keep rising, narrow and steep, with trees balanced on ledges as if the forest has learned to live vertically. Roots reach into cracks, ferns gather in pockets, moss softens the stone, and every green thing seems to know how to hold on without effort. Above us, the pillar tops are quiet little worlds. Some are capped with shrubs and pine, their branches leaning into cloud. From below, they look almost like islands suspended in air, each one separated by a gulf of mist. But they are not floating, they are remnants. They are the pieces left behind after water, gravity, and time gently removed the stone around them. And as we follow the path farther into WULINGYUAN, the pillars begin to show us how a landscape can be carved without haste, one damp season after another. The first layer of understanding comes through the cracks. You notice them in the rock as dark vertical lines, some narrow as a finger, others wide enough for roots and shadows. These cracks are called joints, and they formed as the stone responded to stresses deep within the earth. The rock was lifted, squeezed, loosened, and stretched across ages until it opened along planes of weakness. You do not have to imagine this as violent. In WULINGYUAN, it feels more like a long exhale. The earth rose slowly, and the sandstone adjusted. Tiny fractures became pathways. Rain entered them. Mist condensed inside them. Roots explored them with patient pressure. Once water had a route downward, it could begin the quiet work of separation. This is why the pillars stand so straight. The joints in the sandstone often run nearly vertical, cutting the rock into blocks before erosion finishes the shape. Water follows those lines, widening them year by year. It removes loosened grains, deepens narrow clefts, and gradually turns solid masses into towers, fins, and columns that appear too slender for their height. As we walk between them, you may feel the space itself becoming more vertical. The sky appears only in fragments. The cliffs rise close on either side, and the air feels held in long stone corridors. Drops fall from leaves above and make small sounds on the path. Somewhere, a bird calls once. Then the sound disappears into the damp green distance. The strangeness of Wulingyuan is not only that the pillars are tall, it is that there are so many of them, gathered like a forest made of stone. Some stand apart as solitary towers, some remain connected to ridges, others seem to lean behind veils of mist, half hidden, as if the landscape is still deciding whether to reveal them. You and I can move slowly here, letting the shapes sort themselves out. A pillar may look impossible from one angle, then become part of a ridge from another. A cliff may seem solid, then open into a ravine. The whole place changes with each step because the pillars are not arranged like monuments. They are the uneven result of weather-finding structure inside the rock. Rain matters deeply here. Wulingyuan sits in a humid subtropical region where moisture is generous and the forest remains lush. The air can feel warm and wet in the lower paths, then cooler when mist drifts down from the heights. Water seeps into cracks, washes along bedding planes, gathers minerals, feeds moss, and carries tiny grains away in streams below. The sound of those streams is part of the geology. It is soft at first, hidden under leaves, then clearer where water runs beside the path. Each channel is a small record of removal. Every trickle has helped lower the valleys. Every storm has loosened a little more sand. And over long spans of time, these small movements have made the pillars seem to rise. They are not truly rising in the moment, of course. The land around them has been lowered. That is the gentle illusion. You are walking through the negative space left by erosion, through the places where rock used to be. The pillars are what the rain has not yet taken, and because of that, they feel like time made visible. Below this first forest of stone, the valleys deepen, and we begin to notice how water gives shape to the silence. The ravines of Wulingyuan hold a different kind of quiet. Down here, the pillars are no longer distant forms in mist. They are walls around you, tall and close, with cool air sliding along their bases. The smell changes slightly. You notice wet leaves, mineral dampness, and the faint earthy scent of soil gathered in shaded pockets. Golden Whip Stream moves through one of these lower valleys, and if you picture it beside us, it is clear and calm over rounded stones. The water does not need to be loud. It has all the time it needs. It bends through the gorge, reflecting green branches and pale cliff faces, while the pillars stand above it like patient watchers. Streams in Wulingyuan do more than decorate the landscape. They deepen it. As water flows downslope, it carries sediment away from the bases of cliffs and from the floors of ravines. Over time, channels cut lower, slopes steepen, and sandstone blocks become more isolated. The stream is a quiet sculptor, not through force alone, but through persistence. You can hear that persistence in the steady murmur. It is the sound of contact, water touching stone and moving on. Sometimes the stream slips over a small ledge. Sometimes it gathers in a pool so still that leaves seem to rest on glass. The pillars above are reflected there in broken, wavering shapes, as if the stone forest continues downward into another, darker world. The water also helps explain why the pillars are narrow. When cracks guide rain and run off into vertical channels, erosion works inward as well as downward. Blocks become separated, corners round slightly, faces remain steep where the quartz sandstone holds firm. The result is a landscape that seems carved by a hand that preferred height, shade, and pause. We are not looking at limestone towers. though the feeling may remind you of karst. Wulingyuan's pillars are sandstone, and that matters. Limestone often dissolves chemically in slightly acidic water, making caves, sinkholes, and rounded towers. Quartz sandstone resists dissolution more strongly, so here the shaping depends more on fractures, mechanical weathering, flowing water, and the removal of loosened grains. That difference gives Wulingyuan its special texture. The pillars can have sheer faces, flat ledges, and squared profiles that reveal the architecture of the original rock. You might see horizontal bands where ancient sediment layers remain visible. You might see vertical cracks crossing them, turning the stone into a quiet grid that erosion has slowly opened. The forest softens this geometry. Trees grow from ledges as if the cliffs have small shelves of night soil. Vines hang down in green threads. Ferns curl in damp corners. Lichens stain the rock in pale grey and muted green. As you look up, the pillars feel less like bare geology and more like a living structure that has invited roots to stay. This is another reason the place feels strange. The stone is ancient, but the surface is alive. Each pillar is partly cliff, partly garden. Birds pass between them. Insects move through the leaf litter. Moss drinks from mist before the sun can reach it. Life does not cover the strangeness of Wulingyuan. It makes it quieter, more intimate, and more dreamlike. And as we move lower beside the water, the pillars above us become less like objects and more like a weather system made of stone, guiding air, light, and mist through every narrow passage. The mist in Wulingyuan is one of the softest explanations for its mystery. It gathers in the valleys during humid mornings, rises along the cliffs, and folds around the pillars until distance becomes uncertain. You may see one tower clearly, dark and textured near the path, while others fade behind it in layers of grey and blue. When the air is full of moisture, light behaves gently. It scatters. It loses its hard edges. The sun may be above the mountain, but down here it arrives as a pale glow, caught in leaves and broken into slow brightness. The pillars seem to appear and disappear, not because they move, but because mist keeps changing the space between you and them. This changing visibility deepens the strange feeling. A landscape of solid sandstone becomes a landscape of thresholds. You are always seeing partly. You are always guessing what stands behind the veil. The nearest cliff has sharp moss, wet streaks and roots you can almost touch, while the farther pillars become silhouettes, then suggestions, then nothing but a darker shade inside the air. Mist also belongs to the life of the pillars. Moist air feeds mosses and ferns growing on ledges where soil is thin. It keeps shaded ravines cool. It softens temperature changes, beads on spider silk, and gathers under leaves before falling in small drops. You can feel it on your face as a fine, cool touch that asks nothing from you. In a place like Wulingyuan, moisture helps weather the rock in subtle ways. Water enters cracks and bedding planes. It loosens grains where cement is weaker. It helps roots expand into small openings. During cooler seasons, changes in temperature may add their own quiet stress, while chemical changes affect minerals around the sandstone, slowly weakening surfaces that already carry fractures. Still, the rock does not yield evenly. That is important. If everything eroded at the same speed, we would not have pillars. We would have smoother slopes, less drama in the shape, less of this strange vertical forest. The wonder comes from unevenness, from strong quartz-rich zones standing while weaker zones retreat, from joints opening one path and ignoring another. You can think of the landscape as a slow conversation between resistance and release. The quartz sandstone resists, the cracks release, the rain returns, the valleys deepen, the trees settle wherever they can, and you, walking quietly through it, can feel how the place has been made by differences too small to notice in a single human day. The pillars often look delicate from a distance. Some seem thin enough to be temporary, like towers of cloud given stone for a little while. Yet many have endured through vast spans of weather. Their sides are steep because the rock is strong. Their separations are deep because water has worked patiently through lines already prepared by the earth. This is why Wulingyuan can feel both fragile and enduring. The mist makes it seem almost vanishing. The sandstone makes it remain. You stand between those impressions, breathing the damp air, and the mind settles because it does not have to choose. The place can be strange because it is both things at once. Above the ravines, the pillar tops hold another quiet world, and as we let the path rise in our imagination, we come closer to the small forests balanced in the sky. Up on the pillar crowns of Wulingyuan, the world becomes narrow and wind-touched. You may imagine standing at a safe distance from an edge, where shrubs lean over empty air and pine needles hold small drops of cloud. The stone underfoot is rough, and the soil is thin, gathered from fallen leaves, dust, and the slow decay of roots. These upper surfaces are not broad mountain meadows. Many are small, irregular, and isolated by steep walls. Yet life finds them. Pines twist into shapes made by weather and limited space. Bushes root into cracks. Grasses bend where the wind passes over the tower. The forest is not continuous here. It becomes a scattered constellation of green islands. This separation matters for the ecology of Wulingyuan. When plants grow on isolated pillars, each top can become a slightly different habitat. One may hold more shade, another may catch more wind, a third may keep moisture longer after mist. Seeds arrive by air, by birds, by gravity from nearby slopes, and only some find enough soil to remain. You can feel the patience of those small habitats. Nothing grows extravagantly on a pillar top without negotiation. Roots must search carefully. Leaves must endure bright sun after long mist. Soil must be held against rain. A tree that looks small from below may be old, shaped by wind and scarcity, living slowly above the valley. The pillars themselves influence the air. Their steep sides create shaded corridors where coolness lingers. Their gaps guide breezes, lifting mist and scent through the ravines. In the morning, vapor rises like breath. Later, warmth may pull it apart, revealing cliffs that have been hidden. The landscape changes without ever feeling restless. Geologically, these tops are remnants of a surface that used to be more connected. Before the valleys were cut so deeply, before joints widened into ravines, the sandstone formed broader masses. Erosion removed the lower and weaker portions between resistant blocks. What now appears as a tower was once part of something larger, and its summit is a memory of that older level. That thought can be very calming. A pillar is not an isolated miracle. It is a remnant with a history. It tells you that landscapes do not simply appear as final shapes. They pass through forms, lose connections, reveal inner structure, and become strange only after long transformation. Wulingyuan is not frozen in time. It is moving slowly enough to feel still. From the higher paths, the pillars gather in waves. Some are dark with forest, some are pale where fresh faces catch light. Some vanish halfway down into fog. You look out with me, and the eye cannot count them easily. They recede into distance like a stone sea, each one rising separately, yet all belonging to the same deep pattern. That pattern is what makes Wulingyuan so unlike ordinary mountains. Most mountain views spread outward in ridges, slopes, and peaks. Here, the eye meets vertical repetition. Pillar after pillar stands free or nearly free, so the landscape feels less like a wall and more like a forest turned to stone, with trunks too wide, too tall, and too ancient to name. And as the mist thins along the upper ledges, we begin to see the older story inside the rock itself, written in beds, grains, and quiet horizontal lines. The layers in Wulingyuan sandstone are easy to overlook when mist and height take your attention. But if you let your gaze rest on a cliff face, you may notice bands running across it. Some are subtle, some catch the light differently. They mark the old bedding of sediment, where one period of sand settled over another in the deep past. These horizontal lines give the pillars a calm, stacked feeling. They remind you that even the tallest tower was built from small arrivals. Sand came, settled, was covered and pressed. More sand came, water moved. Minerals cemented grains together. The process was not theatrical. It was repetitive, slow, and ordinary in the way the deepest changes often are. Quartz grains are especially durable. They survive long transport by rivers and waves better than many other minerals. By the time they collect in thick sand bodies, they may already have been worn smooth from older rocks. In Wulingyuan, those grains became part of strong sandstone, and that strength helped the later pillars keep their steep, unlikely forms. You can imagine the rock before it was lifted, before the valleys opened. It was buried, compressed, and held in darkness. Pressure turned loose sediment into stone. Mineral cement bound grains together. The future pillars were not yet visible. They were hidden inside a larger body of sandstone, waiting for uplift, fracture, weather, and water to reveal them. There is something restful in that hiddenness. Not everything that matters is visible at once. The strange beauty of Wulingyuan was inside the rock long before mist wrapped around it, long before footpaths moved through the valley, long before anyone stood below and looked up in wonder. The pillars were potential, held quietly in the earth. Then uplift changed the conditions. As the region rose, streams gained energy to cut downward. Slopes steepened, joints opened wider, weather reached deeper into the rock. The old sandstone, once buried and continuous, became exposed to air, rain, roots, and temperature. The landscape began to separate into blocks, and some of those blocks became the pillars we see now. This is why the place feels strange but not random. The towers look dreamlike, yet their shapes follow real structure. Vertical joints decide where walls split. Horizontal bedding influences ledges and breaks. Rock strength controls which masses remain. Streams remove loosened material from below. The forest covers and protects some surfaces, while roots gently pry at others. As you listen, you can let the science make the place more peaceful rather than less mysterious. Knowing the process does not take away the wonder. It lets you feel the long calm beneath it. The pillars are not illusions. They are explanations made visible, standing in mist, holding trees, and keeping the memory of sand inside their height. The air near the rock is cool now in our imagined evening. The stone releases the dampness it has held all day. Leaves darken as light fades. The bands in the sandstone become harder to see, but the pillars remain as silhouettes, tall and quiet against the paling sky. Wulingyuan becomes simpler in low light, and somehow stranger. And as evening settles into the ravines, the story turns from the making of the pillars to the way they hold darkness, sound, and stillness between them. The darkness in Wulingyuan does not arrive all at once. It gathers first in the narrow spaces, under overhangs, behind trunks, and inside the deep vertical seams where rain has been working for ages. You can feel it before you see it fully. A coolness around the ankles, a soft lowering of the forest voice, a sense that the cliffs are keeping the evening close to their stone bodies. The pillars remain above us, but their details begin to blur, and their height becomes more important than their surface. As the light thins, sound changes too. The small noises of the day seem to move farther away, while the stream below becomes clearer, as if darkness has given it more room. You may hear a drip falling from leaf to leaf, then touching rock, then joining some hidden runnel that slips toward the valley floor. Wulingyuan is full of these small descents, water moving through moss, through cracked sandstone, through soil caught in roots, and all of it lowering the landscape grain by grain. This quiet evening helps us understand another part of the pillars' strangeness. They are not only forms seen in daylight, they are also spaces that hold atmosphere. Between the towers, air cools at different speeds, mist gathers in different pockets, and shadows climb the walls in long, uneven layers. You and I can stand in one ravine and feel enclosed, then move only a little higher and sense the sky opening again through a pale gap above. The pillars make their own rooms. Some rooms are narrow and damp, with fern leaves brushing the edge of the path. Some feel broad and airy, where several towers stand apart and the forest floor receives a gentle wash of evening light. Others are nearly hidden until you enter them, and then the walls rise around you in sandstone faces that feel both protective and impossibly tall. This is why Wulingyuan can feel like a landscape inside a landscape. It is not strange because it is unreal. It is strange because it is specific. The rock had to be hard enough to stand, jointed enough to split, lifted enough for streams to cut down, and wet enough for weathering to keep working through every season. If any one of those quiet conditions had been very different, the result might have been hills, cliffs, or ordinary slopes instead of this vertical forest of quartz sandstone. You can let that thought rest lightly. A landscape is often a meeting of conditions, not a single cause. Wulingyuan's pillars are the visible meeting place of rock strength, fracture patterns, climate, uplift, water, and time. None of those things feels dramatic while we are standing here in the damp evening air, yet together they have made towers that look as if they belong to a dream remembered by stone. When darkness settles deeper, the forest no longer distracts from the shapes. The green fades first, then the brown trunks fade, then the cliff faces become large, slow presences, rising beyond what the eye can easily follow. You do not need to see every detail now. You can feel the pillars by their absence of light, by the way they block the remaining sky, by the hush gathered around their bases. And as we move with the fading light, Wulingyuan begins to show us how the same stone can feel immense from below and delicate from above. From a lower path, a pillar may seem unshakable. It rises as a wall, a tower, a column so tall that your neck tires before your eyes reach the top. The base may be hidden in vegetation, wrapped in vines and dark shrubs, while the upper face catches the last blue of evening. You feel small beside it, but not in a frightening way. You feel placed within something older and slower than your own thoughts. Yet if you imagine looking down from a nearby ridge, the same pillar can appear thin. It may stand separated from its neighbors by deep clefts, with only a modest crown of trees resting on its summit. Wulingyuan often holds both impressions at once. From below, the pillars are massive. From above, they become slender remnants, carefully shaped by the removal of everything around them. This double feeling is part of their strangeness. The science behind that double feeling is simple and patient. Erosion does not merely smooth a surface. It creates perspective. It cuts valleys, opens gaps, deepens channels, and turns once connected rock into isolated forms. When the surrounding stone is taken away, the remaining masses gain visual power. They seem taller because the valleys are lower. They seem lonelier because joints have become ravines. You can imagine the old sandstone body as a great continuous layer, not yet broken into towers. Then fractures give water pathways. Streams begin to find those pathways. Weather loosens exposed edges. Blocks separate. Valley floors sink lower. Over immense spans, the landscape becomes less like a single raised surface and more like a community of pillars, each one holding its own patch of forest and sky. There is also gravity, always present, though quiet. It pulls loosened blocks from cliff faces. It carries fallen grains downslope. It helps streams move sediment away from the bases of towers. In Wulingyuan, gravity does not need to announce itself with collapse for us to know it is working. It is in the slope of soil, the fall of leaves, the path of water, the slow settling of every loosened particle. The pillars remain because their stone resists this removal better than the surrounding weakened zones. But they are not permanent in the absolute sense. No landscape is. Their calm comes partly from this truth. They stand now, tall and patient, yet they are still participating in change. A tiny flake loosens, a root thickens, a ledge gathers soil, a stream carries another soft measure of the mountain away. This does not make the place less peaceful, it makes it more so. Wulingyuan teaches a kind of stillness that includes movement too slow to disturb rest. You can breathe with that. You can feel your own thoughts settling, not because nothing changes, but because change here is almost tender in its scale. The land is becoming itself across time too wide for worry. As night deepens in our imagined walk, the pillars gather into shadowed ranks, and the strange details give way to the larger rhythm of ridge, ravine, tower, and air. The ridges of Wulingyuan are not smooth backbones. They break, narrow, and open into cliffs where the sandstone has been divided by joints. From some places, you may see a line of pillars standing along the edge of a ridge, like remnants of a wall that weather has patiently unfastened. From other places, ridges appear only as dark shoulders behind the nearer towers, softened by layers of mist. These ridges help explain why the pillar forest is not evenly spread like trees in a grove. The geology directs the pattern. Stronger sandstone masses remain along certain structural lines, while ravines develop where joints, streams, and weathering have worked more deeply. The result is uneven, and that unevenness feels natural to the eye, because real landscapes rarely repeat themselves perfectly. Wulingyuan is patterned, but it is not mechanical. You can walk a path that follows one contour for a while, then bends suddenly toward a lookout. The ground may be stone under thin soil, slick in places where moss holds moisture. The smell of wet leaves rises when your step presses them. Around you, trunks lean away from the slope, and beyond them the pillars appear and disappear through openings in the vegetation. The whole path feels like it is listening. At a lookout, the view becomes spacious. The pillar tops spread into distance, their crowns darkened by trees. Mist may fill the lower valleys, hiding the bases so completely that the towers seem to grow out of cloud. This is one of Wulingyuan's most famous illusions, though it is made from ordinary air and moisture. Stone becomes skyborn because the valley disappears beneath a pale, moving floor. The illusion is powerful because our eyes expect mountains to be connected to ground. When mist hides that connection, the pillars seem free of weight. Yet the science remains calm beneath the beauty. Cool, moist air collects in valleys. Tiny water droplets scatter light. The lower parts of the cliffs vanish. The upper portions remain visible. Your mind completes the scene as floating towers, and the landscape becomes a quiet dream without ever leaving geology. You might notice how the colors change as this happens. Near stone looks dark gray, brown, and moss green. Farther pillars become blue-gray. The farthest ones lose detail and become soft vertical washes against the sky. This atmospheric perspective makes Wulingyuan feel deeper than it already is, layering distance inside distance, until the eye rests instead of trying to measure. That resting is part of why this place suits a slow night journey. You do not have to solve the whole landscape. You can let one pillar come forward, then let it fade. You can follow one line of cliff down into mist, then release it. The scene invites attention, but it does not demand it. It gives the half-awake mind enough form to hold, and enough softness to drift. And as we stand quietly with the ridges darkening behind us, the pillars remind us that strangeness often comes from ordinary forces working together in a way that is almost too patient to imagine. Rain is one of those ordinary forces. In Wulingyuan, it arrives as mist, drizzle, summer shower, cloudburst, and lingering dampness after the sky has cleared. It falls on leaf, ledge, root, and bare sandstone. It gathers in joints, follows the easiest path downward, and leaves behind the fresh mineral smell that rises from wet rock. You can almost hear each drop choosing a route. Over one season, rain may seem to do very little. It darkens the cliffs, it feeds the moss, it swells the stream, it makes the path slick underfoot. But over long time, each wet interval matters. Water seeps into microscopic spaces between grains. It loosens weathered surfaces. It transports sand from ledges. It widens small grooves. It turns a crack into a channel, and a channel into a cleft. The quartz grains themselves resist chemical decay, but sandstone is more than quartz alone. It has cement between grains, and it has surfaces where minerals, pressure, and water interact. Where the cement is weaker, grains can be freed. Where fractures are open, roots and moisture can work more deeply. The pillar faces we see are shaped by these subtle differences, so even resistant stone carries a quiet vulnerability at its edges. You may notice vertical streaks on the cliffs, darker after rain. Those streaks reveal paths where water repeatedly runs down the same face. Sometimes they nourish ribbons of moss, sometimes they stain the rock with minerals and organic films. Sometimes they mark a place where a tiny groove is slowly becoming more pronounced. The stone is being read by the water, line by line. In Wulingyuan, weathering is not separate from the forest. Leaves fall, decay, and make acids that mingle with rainwater. Roots enter cracks, not violently, but with the steady growth of living tissue. Microorganisms inhabit damp surfaces. Moss traps moisture against the rock. The living skin of the landscape helps hold water in place, and water gives life more places to settle. This relationship gives the pillars their softened edges. A bare desert sandstone tower may show wind-scoured forms and warm colors. Here, the subtropical forest wraps the rock in dampness and green. The shapes are steep, but not dry. The cliffs are hard, but not empty. Every surface seems to have a conversation with moisture, shade, and small life. You and I can pause beside a dripping wall and feel how cool the air is there. A fern may arch from a crevice at shoulder height. Fine roots may hang like dark threads. The sandstone is close enough to touch, though we only imagine the contact. Its surface would feel uneven and damp, and it would leave the faint sensation of mineral grit on the fingertips. This closeness matters. Wulingyuan can be photographed from far above, where the pillars become spectacular and almost unreal. But from below, the strangeness is quieter. It is in the small details that make the immense forms believable. One drop, one root, one grain, one crack. The enormous landscape is made of these intimate things, repeated beyond counting, and as the rain-darkened stone cools beneath the forest, we drift toward the places where vertical walls make the air feel stiller, and the world outside seems very far away. Some ravines in Wulingyuan feel like narrow chambers. The pillars and cliffs rise so closely that the sky becomes a pale ribbon overhead. The path may follow the base of a wall, then cross a small bridge over clear water, then turn under a canopy of leaves that holds the evening in place. You can feel the temperature settle around you, cooler than the open slopes above. The sound inside these ravines is softened by stone and vegetation. A voice would not need to be raised here, and we do not raise ours. Water murmurs under the bridge. Leaves make a muted, papery sound when a breeze passes through. Drops fall from high ledges in slow intervals. The space has a natural hush, as if the pillars themselves are asking everything to move gently. These narrow corridors form because erosion concentrates along weaknesses. A joint opens. Water follows. The opening deepens. Weathering attacks the exposed faces. Blocks loosen and are removed. Over time, a crack that once lived only inside the rock becomes a passage wide enough for air, light, and forest. In Wulingyuan, many of these passages have grown into ravines that separate pillars from ridges and from each other. The walls can appear almost vertical because the quartz sandstone holds steep faces well. Softer materials might slump more readily into gentler slopes. Here, the rock can keep its edge after the base has been cut down, at least for long periods. That ability to stand steeply is essential to the landscape's character. Without it, the pillars would relax into hills, and the strange vertical forest would soften into something less distinct. You may see fallen blocks at the foot of cliffs, softened by moss and soil. They remind us that even resistant stone eventually yields where fractures deepen or support weakens. But the feeling is not one of danger in this telling. It is simply part of the long exchange between height and gravity. A fallen block becomes habitat. Moss covers it, roots cross it, water moves around it, and the valley continues to breathe. There is something comforting about that continuity. The landscape receives its own changes. Nothing is wasted in the forested ravines. Fallen stone becomes a small slope. Dead leaves become soil. Mist becomes droplets. Droplets become stream water. Stream water becomes valley depth. Wulingyuan's pillars stand above all this circulation, but they are also part of it, slowly giving themselves back to the ravines below. If you look upward from such a place, the pillars can seem endless. Their tops may be hidden by overhangs and foliage. The eye follows a vertical crack until it disappears into shadow. Somewhere above, a pine leans from a ledge. Somewhere below, water finds the lowest line. You are held between upward stone and downward movement, and the body naturally becomes still. This is one of the quiet gifts of Wulingyuan. it brings scale into the senses. You smell wet moss, hear a stream, feel cool air, and see a tower that took vast time to shape. The small and the immense are not separate here. They meet in the same breath. The mind begins to loosen because it cannot hurry a landscape like this. And as we leave the narrow ravine in thought, the path opens again, and the pillars show their faces in the pale wash of moonlit mist. Moonlight changes Wulingyuan into a simpler world. It does not show the fine color of the leaves or the warm tones hidden in the sandstone. It gives the pillars edges, silhouettes, and dim silver faces where the rock turns toward the sky. The mist becomes brighter than the forest, and the valleys seem filled with a soft, unmoving tide. You can imagine each tower rising from that brightness without effort. In this light, the pillars seem even stranger because their geological detail disappears. You no longer see bedding lines or weathering stains clearly. You see form. Long vertical sides, flat or broken tops, isolated crowns, dark trees resting high above the mist. The mind reads these shapes almost as symbols, but they are still patient sandstone, jointed and weathered into height. Wulingyuan's most unusual beauty often comes from this balance between explanation and dream. By day, you may understand the pillars through rock type, joints, uplift, and erosion. By night, that understanding becomes quieter, almost like a memory beneath the scene. You do not need to repeat the process in your mind. You simply feel that the shapes have reasons, and those reasons are old. The moonlit mist also softens distance. Near and far become less separate. A pillar close to us may appear almost as pale as one across the valley if fog catches enough light between them. The scene becomes layered but ambiguous. You might not know exactly how far away a tower is or how deep the valley below it falls. That uncertainty is gentle here. It lets the eyes rest. There is no harsh edge in the view. Even the steep cliffs feel hushed by moisture and shade. The forest canopy becomes a dark, uneven fabric draped across slopes and pillar tops. Where water runs, it catches a faint glimmer. Where the rock is dry, it holds darkness. The whole landscape seems to be breathing slowly under a blanket of mist. If we listen, we may hear night insects in the vegetation, their calls thin and steady. We may hear a distant stream, lower than before, as if heard through layers of leaves. We may hear our own breathing settle into the pace of the place. Wulingyuan at night is not empty. It is simply quieter than the part of the mind that usually names things. That quietness helps us feel how strange the pillars are, without needing amazement to become loud. They do not need drama. Their presence is enough. A vertical forest of quartz sandstone, made from ancient sand, opened by fractures, lowered by streams, softened by mist, and dressed with living green. The description can remain simple, because the reality is already deep. You can rest your attention on one pillar now. It stands partly hidden, its base lost in pale vapor, its top carrying a small, dark cluster of trees. It has sides cut by time, not by intention. It is alone from this angle, though connected in origin to all the stone around it. It seems fragile in moonlight, and yet it has lasted through more seasons than the mind can hold. And as we let that single pillar fade back into the mist, the wider landscape begins to feel like an archive of slow water and patient stone. An archive is usually imagined as paper, rooms, shelves, and quiet hands turning old pages. But Wulingyuan keeps its record in sandstone. Each bedding plane is a page of ancient sediment. Each joint is a line where stress found release. Each ravine is a passage written by water. Each pillar is a sentence left standing after the surrounding words have been softened and carried away. You do not have to read it quickly. In fact, it can only be read slowly. The rock asks for the kind of attention that sleep already understands, unhurried and receptive. You look, then let the view settle. You notice, then let the noticing pass. The pillars remain. Their strange shapes keep their own time, and your thoughts can begin to keep it too. Geologists may describe Wulingyuan as a sandstone peak forest, and that phrase is useful. It tells us that the pillars are not isolated accidents. They are a whole terrain of peaks, columns, walls, ravines, and narrow summits. The word forest feels especially fitting. because the stone repeats, like trunks, while the living trees weave through and over them. Rock and vegetation share the same vertical rhythm. Yet this is not a forest in the ordinary sense. Trees grow, die, and return to soil in cycles short enough for human memory to partly grasp. The pillars change on a different scale. Their cycles are measured in erosion, exposure, fracture widening, stream incision, and slope retreat. The living forest moves over the stone forest like breath over a sleeping body. That contrast gives Wulingyuan its dreamlike calm. The green is seasonal and responsive. The sandstone is ancient and slow. Mist passes in minutes. Streams work for ages. A bird crosses a valley in a few seconds, while the pillar behind it may have taken millions of years to stand apart. You sense many kinds of time layered in one view, and none of them needs to compete. The place is strange because time is visible there in different textures. Mist is soft time. Water is flowing time. Moss is growing time. Sandstone is compressed time. Erosion is patient time. When you stand among the Wulingyuan pillars, you are not outside those movements. You are briefly part of the same layered quiet, breathing in damp air and watching light move over stone. This is why the landscape does not feel empty. Even in stillness, every surface is doing something, though most of it is too slow to notice directly. Moisture is entering pores. Roots are thickening by tiny increments. A grain is loosening somewhere in the dark. A stream is carrying another fleck of quartz away. The pillars stand, and standing is not the same as doing nothing. You may find that thought soothing. Rest does not require absence. Stillness can include many gentle processes. Your body can be at rest, while breath continues. Warmth shifts, and thoughts settle. Wulingyuan's pillars offer the same lesson in stone. They are still, yet changing. They are quiet, yet full of long work. They are strange, yet made from the simplest repeated acts of earth. And as the night air moves softly through the ravines, we begin to follow one of those acts more closely, the long downward journey of a single grain of sand. Imagine one quartz grain resting on a ledge high on a Wulingyuan pillar. It has been part of the sandstone for an immense span of time, locked among other grains by mineral cement. Rain has touched the ledge for season after season. Moss has held moisture near the surface. A tiny crack has opened beside it. At last, not suddenly in any dramatic way, the grain becomes loose enough to move. It may not go far at first. A drop of water shifts it a few inches along a rough surface. It catches behind a lichen patch. It dries there. Later, more rain comes, and the grain slips again, joining other particles in a thin line of runoff. You can imagine it moving down the pillar face in stages, not falling freely, but pausing, resting, and traveling whenever water invites it onward. Eventually it reaches a crack, then a small channel, then the base of the cliff. Leaves gather around it. Soil covers it. A root grows near it. Another storm washes it into a stream, where it rolls among pebbles and fragments of weathered stone. The grain that once helped hold a pillar together now helps make the stream bed shine faintly under clear water. This is erosion at its most intimate, not a grand event, not a spectacle, just movement from height to depth. Wulingyuan's strange towers are shaped by uncountable journeys like this, each one almost nothing by itself, each one contributing to the widening of space around the pillars. The valley grows by receiving what the cliffs release. You can hear the grain's new world in the stream. Water slips over it. Other grains tap against it. Leaves drift above it in the current. Light reaches down through ripples and breaks into moving patterns. The pillar still rises overhead, but a small part of it has begun another chapter in the valley. Even stone has migrations, if we think slowly enough. Some grains may travel far beyond the ravines. Streams carry sediment into larger waters, and those waters carry it onward. Over time, material from high pillars becomes part of bars, banks, floodplains, and distant deposits. The landscape is not only being carved, it is also being redistributed. What leaves one place helps build another, and the earth keeps rearranging its quiet memory. There is a soft comfort in that. Nothing in Wulingyuan is only loss. When rain removes sand from a ledge, it also feeds a stream bed. When a cliff face retreats, it opens light to a new plant. When a block falls, it becomes a mossy mound. The pillars are strange not because they resist change completely, but because they reveal how change can be graceful when seen across deep time. You and I can let the single grain disappear into the stream now. The water takes it without ceremony. The valley keeps its murmur. The pillar remains above, altered by an amount too small for the eye, yet participating in a process vast enough to make the whole stone forest. That scale, from grain to landscape, is one of Wulingyuan's quietest wonders. And as the stream carries its tiny brightness through the dark valley, we turn again toward the pillars themselves, where the walls hold traces of both ancient water and present rain. The ancient water that helped lay down the sandstone is gone, yet its work remains in the layers. The present rain is here, touching the same stone in a different way. Wulingyuan is a meeting of waters separated by deep time. One water deposited sand, another water carves the pillars from it. Between those two roles, the rock became both memory and landscape. You can imagine the ancient sand settling in broad sheets, sorted by current, shaped by the energy of water moving over it. Fine layers formed, coarser layers formed. Surfaces were buried and preserved. Later, pressure and mineral cement turned those layers into stone. Much later, uplift brought them into the reach of rain, mist, roots, and streams. The story is long, but its feeling is simple. Water placed the sand, and water now reveals it. This is why the pillars can feel almost circular in their meaning. They began through accumulation, and now stand through removal. What was gathered becomes exposed. What was buried becomes visible. What was continuous becomes separated. In Wulingyuan, creation and erosion do not feel opposed. They are phases of the same slow rhythm, like breathing in and breathing out across geological time. The rock faces sometimes show slight differences in color or texture from one layer to another. These differences may reflect variations in grain size, cement, weathering, or moisture. To the sleeping eye, they are just soft bands, calm horizontal traces crossing vertical height. But those bands matter. They tell you that the pillar is not a single blank mass. It is a stack of old conditions, lifted into the mist. The vertical joints cross those bands, making a quiet geometry. Horizontal bedding, vertical fracture, downward water, upward trees. Wulingyuan's strangeness is partly the meeting of directions. The land is full of lines that guide the eye and the weather. You look up along a crack, across along a bed, down with a stream, and outward toward a row of towers fading into fog. This directional richness makes the scene restful rather than confusing. The mind follows one line at a time. A dark joint climbs, a ledge turns, a vine falls, a stream bends. The pillars hold enough order for you to feel oriented, and enough complexity for your thoughts to soften. Nothing is flat, nothing is rushed, everything has a path. In the damp night air, the stone may carry a faint sheen. Moonlight touches wet surfaces and leaves dry ones dark. The pillars look like they are breathing moisture, though of course it is the air, the rain, and the porous surfaces interacting. Still, the feeling is gentle. The rock does not seem inert. It seems deeply asleep, yet aware in the way old landscapes can seem aware. You can stand close to one face and imagine the coolness radiating from it. Sandstone that has been shaded all day keeps a calm temperature. The air beside it feels different from the open path. If you placed your ear near the wall, you might hear only your own breath and the distant stream, but the mind supplies a deeper silence, the silence of stone holding time without needing words. And as that silence settles around the pillar face, we begin to notice the plants that make their homes in its cracks, softening the vertical world without hiding its shape. The vegetation of Wulingyuan does not erase the pillars, it reveals them differently. A bare tower would show geology plainly, but the living green shows where water lingers, where soil gathers, where ledges catch enough fallen material for roots to hold. Each patch of moss is a small sign of moisture. Each shrub marks a pocket of possibility. Each pine on a summit shows how life can balance above depth. You can see this in the way plants choose the stone. Ferns like damp shade and often gather near seepage. Moss spreads where surfaces stay wet. Vines travel down from higher ledges or climb from the base, following roughness in the rock. Trees root where cracks widen enough to hold soil. The pillars become vertical gardens, not because the stone is easy, but because life is patient. In WULINGYUAN, the forest and the pillars shape each other. The pillars create shade and sheltered air. Shade helps moisture remain. Moisture supports plants. Plants hold soil and slow runoff in some places, while roots also widen small cracks in others. This is not a simple relationship of protection or erosion. It is a living exchange, subtle and ongoing, with each side changing the conditions for the other. You may notice how green changes with height. Near the valley floor, vegetation can be dense and lush, fed by deeper soil and steady moisture. Higher up, on ledges and pillar tops, plants may be smaller, more wind-shaped and more widely spaced. The same landscape contains abundance and restraint. WULINGYUAN lets you see both at once, one below, one above, connected by stone. The smell would change too as we move through it. In the lower valley, there is leaf mold, wet earth, and the cool scent of stream water. Near a cliff, mineral dampness becomes stronger. Higher among pines, the air may carry resin and the dry green scent of needles, especially when mist lifts for a while. These sensory layers make the geology feel close to the body. The plants also make the pillars feel less severe. Their roots and leaves soften the edges, interrupt the vertical faces, and bring small movements into the stillness. A leaf trembles in a breeze. A vine sways slightly. A drop falls from a fern tip. Against the immense age of quartz sandstone, these small living motions feel delicate, but they are not separate from the story of the place. Over time, organic matter from plants contributes to soil in ledges and cracks. Fallen needles, leaves, and bark gather where the stone allows them. Decomposition makes dark, thin pockets of earth. More plants can take root. Water stays longer. Weathering continues under the cover of life. The pillar surface becomes a boundary where geology and ecology are woven together. This woven quality is part of why WULINGYUAN feels so strange in a peaceful way. The pillars might seem impossible if they were only bare stone. The forest might seem ordinary if it covered gentle hills. Together, they create a world that feels suspended between categories. It is cliff and woodland, tower and habitat, ancient rock and present breath. And as we follow the living green upward in our imagination, from root to branch to misted crown, the pillars lead us again into the open air above the valleys. The air above WULINGYUAN's valleys can feel spacious after the enclosed ravines. Even in imagination, you may sense the shift. The damp closeness loosens, the sky widens. The pillars stand below and around us, their tops uneven, their sides dropping into pale depth. Mist moves in slow bands, revealing and hiding the spaces between towers. The world feels lifted, though we are still only resting inside a thought. From this higher feeling, the pillar forest becomes a pattern of separation. Each tower stands because water and weather have open space around it. But the eye also sees connection. The same sandstone runs through them. The same structural history shaped them. The same climate touches them. WULINGYUAN is a landscape of separated forms that still belong deeply to one another. That belonging matters. It keeps the strangeness from feeling random. When you look across many pillars, you may notice common heights, similar face angles, related textures, repeated vegetation patterns. These similarities tell you that the towers share origins and processes. They are variations in the same slow music, each one shaped by local cracks, local water, local resistance, and the broader conditions of the whole region. Wind moves differently up here. It may be light, just enough to stir leaves on exposed crowns. It passes over gaps and around stone, sometimes rising from warmed slopes, sometimes sinking with cooler air. The pillars interrupt and guide it, making subtle currents that carry moisture, seeds, scents, and the faint sounds of the forest. You can feel how even air has to negotiate with this vertical terrain. In the morning, Sunlight might strike the upper faces while the valleys remain filled with shadow. In late afternoon, the lower ravines cool first, and the pillar tops hold brightness a little longer. At night, the stone releases stored warmth slowly. These small differences create many microclimates. Wulingyuan's strangeness is not only visual, it is atmospheric, changing from ledge to ledge and from hour to hour. Microclimates help explain the diversity of life across the pillars and ravines. A shaded cleft may stay damp long after exposed rock has dried. A south-facing face may receive more sun. A summit may be windier and thinner soiled. A valley floor may collect cool air. Plants and small animals respond to these differences, making the stone forest also an ecosystem of quiet variations. You can sense those variations as textures of comfort. The shaded cleft feels cool on the skin. The sunlit ledge smells warmer, with resin and dry leaves. The misted valley carries mineral dampness and the soft sound of water. The exposed crown feels airy, with sky pressing gently around it. All of these are Wulingyuan, yet each one feels like a different chamber in the same sleeping landscape. This is another answer to why the quartz pillars are so strange. They do not only create height, they create many small worlds stacked and separated in space. A few steps or a few meters of elevation can change light, moisture, wind, soil, and life. The pillars multiply the landscape vertically, giving the forest more surfaces, more edges, and more quiet rooms than a smoother mountain would have. And as we breathe in that high, cool air, the view opens toward the long history beneath the surface, where uplift and deep earth movement prepared the stone for everything rain would later do. Uplift is a slow word, and it suits Wulingyuan. The land did not need to leap upward to become strange. It only needed to rise enough, over enough time, for streams to cut down and for buried sandstone to meet the weather. As the region was elevated, gravity gave water more power to move from high ground to lower valleys. The landscape gained relief, and relief invited carving. You can imagine the sandstone before uplift as quieter in another way, held below or within a less dissected surface. Then, as the region rose, streams began to incise more deeply. Incision is a technical word, but the feeling is simple. Water found its path and lowered it. Valley floors dropped. Slopes steepened. The difference between summit and stream grew larger, and the future pillars began to emerge from connected rock. This is why Wulingyuan's pillars are tied to the shape of the whole land, not just the strength of the sandstone. Resistant rock alone does not create such a terrain. It must be placed where water can remove neighboring material. It must be fractured in ways that guide erosion. It must stand within a climate that keeps weathering active. The pillars are the result of many quiet permissions given over time. Tectonic movement also helped create stress in the rock, and stress helped make joints. Those joints are like invitations for later weathering. Once the land was exposed, rain did not have to start from a perfect surface. It inherited lines of weakness. In Wulingyuan, those inherited lines helped divide the sandstone into blocks, and the blocks became towers as erosion deepened the spaces between them. You may picture these processes as layers of time stacked behind the view. First the sand, then burial, then stone, then stress and fracture, then uplift, then streams cutting down, then weathering along cracks, then forest, mist, and the living surfaces we see now. Each stage is calm when spoken slowly. Together, they make a landscape that feels almost impossible until you let time become wide enough. The pillars are strange because they are not a single event made visible. They are a sequence made visible. A waterfall can show movement immediately. A volcano can show a clear origin in fire. Wulingyuan asks for a softer imagination. It asks you to see ancient deposition, lithification, tectonic stress, erosional relief, humid weathering, and ecological growth, all standing together in one silent tower. That may sound complex, but the body understands it as a feeling. You stand there and sense depth. Not just physical depth in the valleys, but depth of origin. The air is damp. The stone is cool. The trees are rooted in small pockets. The pillars rise through mist. Without naming every process, you feel that something very slow has been taking care of this strangeness for a long time. The word strange here can become gentle. It does not mean wrong or alarming. It means the landscape has moved outside familiar shapes. It means the usual categories have softened. Mountain becomes forest. Forest becomes stone. Valley becomes cloud. Cloud becomes water again on the leaves. Wulingyuan's strangeness is a kind of peaceful crossing between forms. And as we let the deep history settle behind the present view, the path brings us back toward the valley floor, where every large process returns to water, shadow, and the quiet undergrowth. Down near the base of the pillars, scale becomes intimate again. The towers are still immense, but the eye rests on roots, stones, wet leaves, and the dark line where cliff meets soil. You may feel the path under your feet as packed earth and damp stone. The air is cooler close to the wall. The stream is nearer, and its sound folds through the vegetation like a soft thread. The base of a pillar is where many processes meet. Water descending the face reaches the ground. Sediment loosened above gathers and is carried away. Roots explore the boundary between rock and soil. Fallen blocks settle into the slope. The cliff transfers its slow weathering into the valley's living floor. In Wulingyuan, the bases of pillars are not empty supports. They are active, quiet margins. This margin is often shaded, and shade changes everything. Less direct sunlight means moisture lingers longer. Moss spreads more easily. Soil may remain cool. Small invertebrates move through leaf litter. Fungi work on fallen wood. The smell is deep and earthy, with mineral notes from wet sandstone nearby. You can breathe it in slowly, as if the whole ravine has been steeping in rain. The pillar above may look separate from this floor, but it is connected through every drop that descends it. Rainfall on the summit may pass through roots, over ledges, down cracks and along faces before reaching the base. Along the way, it touches soil, leaves, minerals, and small living communities. By the time it enters the stream, it carries traces of the pillar's vertical world. Streams at the base carry both water and memory. A clear stream may seem pure and empty, but it is moving dissolved minerals, tiny grains, fragments of leaf, and the faint chemistry of the slopes around it. It is the valley's way of collecting what the pillars release. When you hear it move, you are hearing the connection between height and depth. This is why walking low in Wulingyuan can feel so grounding. The spectacular towers are above, but the process is near your feet. You see where water crosses the path. You see sand gathered behind a stone. You see a root bending around a block. You see moss brightening after rain. The vastness of geological time becomes touchable in these small, damp signs. There is no need to strain upward constantly. The pillars will remain. You can look down and still be with them, because the valley floor is made from their weathered edges and fallen leaves. The strange stone forest is not just what rises into mist. It is also what settles below, what is carried away, what becomes soil, and what feeds the living ravine. In sleep, the mind often likes this kind of connection. High and low, old and new, stone and water, root and mist. Wulingyuan holds them without forcing them into explanation. We can simply walk, breathe, and let the relationships become a slow background rhythm, like the stream that keeps speaking without needing attention. And as the path follows the stream around another bend, the pillars shift again, no longer a wall, but a procession of forms receding into the dim blue distance. From this bend, one pillar may stand forward, dark and close, while others line up behind it in softer shades. This layering is part of Wulingyuan's visual spell. The landscape is not seen all at once. It is seen through openings, through veils, through sequences of near and far. Your eye moves from one tower to the next, and each one seems to slow the movement of thought. The nearest pillar may show cracks clearly, with small plants clinging to ledges. The next one is less detailed, softened by air. The one beyond becomes bluish and almost flat. Farther still, the shapes merge into a quiet vertical haze. This is not only beauty, it is atmosphere made visible. Moist air scatters light and turns distance into color, giving Wulingyuan its deep floating depth. Painters sometimes rely on this effect, but here the landscape makes it naturally. The humid air becomes part of the scene. It does not hide the pillars completely. It spaces them. It creates pores between forms. The eye rests in those pauses. You can feel the mind loosening as the towers recede, because no single edge demands too much focus. The procession of pillars also helps us sense how erosion advances unevenly. Some towers are more isolated, some remain connected to larger masses. Some are narrow, some are broad, some show fresh-looking faces, while others are heavily softened by vegetation. These differences suggest that each pillar is at a different point in the long movement from connected sandstone to isolated remnant to eventual return. That thought is peaceful when held gently. The landscape is not a finished sculpture. It is a living page in a geological book still being written. WULINGYUAN's strangeness comes partly from seeing many stages together. Ridge, wall, pillar, block, ravine, streambed, and sediment all share the same view. The eye can travel through time by traveling through space. You may notice that the pillars do not all have the same mood. A broad tower feels solemn and grounded. A slender one feels delicate. A forested crown feels sheltered. A bare face feels open and exposed. Yet each mood belongs to sandstone, rain, and mist. The variety keeps the place from becoming a simple pattern. It remains quiet, but never empty. As we continue, the stream bends away from the path and becomes softer. The forest thickens for a while, and the pillars show only in glimpses between trunks. This partial seeing is restful. You do not need to hold the whole landscape in awareness. A single pale wall through leaves is enough. A high ledge with one pine is enough. A vertical shadow behind mist is enough. And as those glimpses pass slowly beside us, WULINGYUAN begins to feel less like a place we are studying and more like a place that is teaching us how to look slowly. Looking slowly is different from looking carefully in a tense way. It has no effort in it. You allow the scene to arrive. You let your eyes rest on a crack, a wet ledge, a tree root, a band of mist between pillars. Then you let that detail go and receive the next one. WULINGYUAN rewards this kind of attention because its strangeness is made from accumulation. At first, the pillars may seem simply spectacular, tall stone towers in a green, misty landscape. But after a while, you begin to notice the subtler reasons they feel unlike other mountains. Their sides are steep because the rock resists. Their separations are deep because water followed joints. Their tops are green because life found small holdings in the stone. Their bases are shadowed because valleys have been cut down around them. Each detail adds weight to the wonder, not heavy weight, but depth. The kind that lets the mind sink comfortably instead of sparkle with surprise. You begin to understand that WULINGYUAN's strangeness is not a surface effect. It reaches into mineral grains, structural fractures, climate patterns, plant communities, and the long behavior of flowing water. This is the calmest kind of explanation. It does not remove mystery. It gives mystery a place to rest. When you know that the pillars are quartz sandstone shaped by weathering and erosion, you can see them more fully. The mist still makes them dreamlike. The height still feels improbable. But the dream now has roots in the earth, and that makes it steadier. You can breathe with that steadiness. Inhale the imagined damp air. Exhale slowly into the hush of the ravine. The stone will not hurry. The stream will not hurry. The moss will not hurry. Even the mist moves at a pace that feels kind to the body. Around us, WULINGYUAN keeps its vertical silence, and the night holds every pillar with the same soft patience. A distant, owl-like call might move through the trees, then fade before we name it. A leaf may fall from a high branch, turning once or twice before landing on the wet path. The sound is almost nothing. Yet in a quiet place, almost nothing is enough. It reminds you that stillness is not emptiness, but a fine attention spread across many small things. The pillars, too, are attentive in their way. They hold rain. They hold roots. They hold the memory of ancient sand. They hold shadows, ledges, and the pale touch of mist. They hold height, without needing to explain themselves. You can stand beside them in thought and feel some part of yourself become less hurried, as if your own inner weather has begun to settle. And as that inner weather softens, we move toward another part of Wulingyuan's strangeness, the way the pillars make depth feel vertical, horizontal, and atmospheric all at once. Depth usually means looking down into a valley or out toward a horizon. In Wulingyuan, depth happens in several directions. You look up along a pillar and feel vertical depth. You look across rows of towers and feel horizontal depth. You look into mist and feel atmospheric depth, where distance is measured by fading rather than by line. The landscape surrounds the senses with layers. This layered depth makes the pillars feel larger than their measurements. A single tower may be impressive, but the spaces between towers multiply the feeling. Every gap holds air, shadow, moisture, and uncertainty. Every ravine suggests further passages. Every distant silhouette implies more stone beyond it. Wulingyuan does not present one grand object. It creates a field of repeating invitations. The geological reason is again tied to dissection. Streams and weathering have cut the sandstone plateau into a complex terrain. Instead of one slope descending smoothly, there are cliffs, narrow ridges, towers, gullies, and valleys. Relief is broken into many surfaces. Light and mist then enter that brokenness, making the terrain feel even more intricate and deep. You can feel this if you imagine standing where 3 or 4 valleys meet. Pillars rise on several sides. Some are close enough to show individual trees. Others are half hidden behind nearer walls. The ground drops away in one direction and climbs in another. The air carries different temperatures from shaded ravines and exposed slopes. Your senses receive depth as a gentle encirclement. This is very different from looking at a single mountain peak. A peak often draws the eye upward to one point. Wulingyuan draws the eye into intervals, between pillars, behind pillars, down ravines, along ledges, into mist. It is a landscape of thresholds, and that is why it feels so strange and dreamlike. The eye is always entering another quiet space. The pillars also make the sky feel unusual. Instead of one broad dome overhead, the sky appears in fragments between vertical forms. A pale opening above a ravine, a blue wedge between towers, a mist-bright gap behind a pine crown. These fragments make the air feel close and far at the same time. You are under the sky, but also inside the stone. At night, those fragments darken. The sky may show only as a deeper blue above the pillar tops, with no hard boundary between cloud and darkness. The towers become silhouettes around the edges of vision. The valleys hold a soft blackness, not empty, but dense with leaves, water, and hidden stone. Wulingyuan becomes a chambered world, open to stars, yet enclosed by cliffs. The body can rest in that enclosure. There is no need to go anywhere. You are simply here, in the slow architecture of quartz, sandstone, and forest. The pillars rise. The mist moves. The stream continues. Depth surrounds you without asking for response. It is enough to breathe and let the layered space become part of the rhythm of sleep. And as we rest within that depth, the ancient sand inside the pillars calls us back once more, not as a fact to learn, but as a texture to feel. Sand is humble before it becomes stone. It moves under water, under wind, under the pressure of currents and gravity. It gathers in ripples and beds. It shifts easily when it is loose. Yet given burial, pressure, and time, sand can become strong enough to stand as the Wulingyuan pillars, holding forests in the mist above deep ravines. That transformation is one of the landscape's quiet miracles. If you look closely at sandstone, you are looking at many small pasts held together. Each quartz grain may have come from an older rock, weathered free, carried away, rounded by movement, and deposited again. The pillar is therefore not just ancient in one layer of time. It contains recycled time, older fragments gathered into a newer form, then revealed again by erosion. This layered ancestry deepens the calm. Nothing begins from nowhere. Wulingyuan's pillars are part of a long chain of making and remaking. Older rocks became grains. Grains became sandstone. Sandstone became pillars. pillars slowly become sediment again. The cycle is vast, but the feeling is simple, like waves returning and leaving, with no need to finish. The quartz itself gives the pillars endurance. It is chemically stable at the Earth's surface compared with many minerals. It resists weathering and remains as other components change. This does not make it invincible, only persistent. Persistence is the right word for Wulingyuan. The stone persists, the forest persists, the rain persists. The result is a landscape where endurance and change are not opposites. You may imagine the grains in a pillar as countless tiny lights, though they do not glow in the dark. In sunlight, quartz can catch brightness subtly, giving fresh sandstone faces a pale, granular sparkle. In mist, that sparkle is muted. At night, it disappears, but knowing it is there gives the dark stone a hidden gentleness, a memory of brightness held inside mineral form. The surfaces we see have been exposed to air for far less time than the grains have existed. A cliff face may be young compared with the rock behind it. Weathering continually reveals new surfaces as old ones retreat. In this way, Wulingyuan is both ancient and newly made. Each exposed face is a recent page opened in a very old book. This helps explain why the pillars can feel alive without moving. Their surfaces are active boundaries. Behind the face is solid stone. On the face are moisture, plants, lichens, cracks, and tiny changes. In front of the face is air, mist, light, and your quiet attention. The pillar stands at the meeting point of interior history and present atmosphere. You can let your mind rest on that meeting point. There is no sharp line between past and present here. The old sand touches tonight's mist. The ancient bedding carries fresh rain. A modern fern roots in a fracture made possible by deep earth stress. Wulingyuan gathers times together so softly that they feel like one continuous breath. And as that breath continues through the ravine, the night becomes cooler, and the pillars turn darker, carrying us toward the deeper stillness before dawn. Before dawn, the air in Wulingyuan can feel especially still. The warmth of day has gone. The stone has cooled. Mist may thicken again in the valleys, pooling around pillar bases and threading through trees. The forest is not silent, but its sounds are sparse and softened. You may hear water, a faint insect rhythm, and the occasional drop falling from a leaf heavy with condensation. This hour belongs to moisture. It gathers on railings, leaves, roots, and stone. It makes the path shine faintly where moonlight or early grey light touches it. It darkens the sandstone faces and deepens the smell of moss. You can feel it on your skin as a cool veil, not cold enough to startle, just enough to make the breath slow and aware. The pillars in this hour seem less like shapes and more like presences. Their tops are hidden, their bases are hidden. Only portions of their sides appear through mist, pale here, dark there, interrupted by trees. Wulingyuan becomes incomplete to the eye, and that incompleteness is restful. You do not need to assemble the whole picture. The unseen parts can remain unseen. Scientifically, this pre-dawn mist is part of the local water cycle. Air cools, moisture condenses, valleys collect denser, cooler air, vegetation releases and holds water. The stone surfaces become places where droplets form and linger. This delicate cycling does not carve the pillars in a single night, but it helps maintain the damp conditions that support weathering, moss, and the ravine ecosystem. The relationship between mist and stone is almost meditative. Mist hides the form. Then water reveals the form through weathering across time. Mist softens the edges, while rain sharpens the separations by following cracks. Moisture makes Wulingyuan dreamlike in the moment and strange in the long term. It is both veil and tool, both atmosphere and agent. You can imagine placing one slow foot after another on the path, hearing only the subdued contact of soul and damp stone. The pillars beside us are too tall to take in, so we let them remain partly unknown. Their unknownness is not frightening. It is spacious. It allows the mind to stop reaching and begin resting inside the presence of what cannot be fully measured. This is often how natural wonders become soothing. Not because they are simple, but because their complexity is too old to demand immediate understanding. Wulingyuan's pillars contain more time than we can think at once, so we do not try. We listen to the stream, smell the wet forest, feel the cool air, and let the towers stand in their own depth. The first light before sunrise may begin as a faint paling above the ridges. It does not break the stillness, it only changes its color. The mist becomes visible from within, softly gray instead of dark. The upper pillar faces start to separate from the sky. Trees on the crowns become delicate black shapes, and the whole landscape seems to rise slowly out of sleep. And as dawn approaches without hurry, Wulingyuan shows us again that the pillars are most strange when they are half revealed, balanced between stone, cloud, forest, and time. In early light, the quartz sandstone faces can appear cool and muted. Their colors are not loud. Gray, tan, brown, and green blend together under the mist. Wet streaks mark the cliffsides. Ledges catch thin lines of brightness. The forest below remains shadowed, while the upper crowns begin to glow softly. You can feel the day arriving by degrees, rather than announcement. This gradual revealing is important to the emotional shape of the place. Wulingyuan does not need a sudden view to be powerful. It can emerge slowly. A pillar appears first as a shadow, then as a face, then as a textured tower with trees on top and cracks running down its side. Another appears behind it, then another. The stone forest returns from the mist, one form at a time. The process mirrors the way we understand the landscape. First, we see the wonder, then we learn the rock, then we notice the water, then the fractures, the plants, the air, the grains, the uplift, and the slow lowering of valleys. Understanding also arrives one form at a time, and it is gentler that way. You are not forced into knowledge. You are invited into it. In this light, bedding planes may become visible again across the pillars. Some ledges stand out where slightly different layers weather at different rates. Small overhangs cast fine shadows. Vertical cracks darken as they hold moisture. The surface becomes a map of resistance and weakness, but it remains beautiful before it becomes analytical. The eye receives the softness first. You may hear more birds now, though we keep their presence quiet. They move through the trees and across the ravines, belonging to the living skin of Wulingyuan. Their calls are brief and spacious. They do not interrupt the pillars. They give scale to the air between them. A small, moving life crossing a deep stone gap makes the gap feel even larger, and somehow more peaceful. The forest scent changes slightly as light warms the leaves. Wet earth remains, but green notes rise. Pine resin may become clearer on exposed slopes. The stream keeps its cool mineral smell. The sandstone, drying slowly in places, releases the subtler scent of damp rock fading toward warmth. These changes are small, but in a quiet script of the senses. Small changes are enough. The pillars continue to stand as records of uneven erosion. Their strange shapes remind us that landscapes are not designed from outside. They emerge from conditions. Wulingyuan's towers are the outcome of what the rock allowed and what water insisted upon. The result feels artistic, but the artist is not a hand. It is time moving through structure. This can be a calming thought for the listener inside the night. Beautiful forms do not always require urgency, intention, or force. They can arise from repeated quiet contact, from water returning, from cracks opening, from grains loosening, from roots finding shade. Wulingyuan is strange because patience, given enough time, can make shapes more astonishing than speed. And as daylight slowly strengthens above the ravines, we follow the path toward a place where the pillars stand in clusters, close enough to feel like a gathering of ancient stone. A cluster of Wulingyuan pillars can feel almost conversational, though they make no sound. Several towers may stand within one view, separated by narrow clefts and draped in vegetation. Their faces turn at different angles. One catches light, another stays in shade, a third disappears behind mist rising from below. Together, they create a sense of presence, as if the landscape has gathered its oldest thoughts in one place. The spaces between clustered pillars are as important as the pillars themselves. Without the gaps, there would be only a cliff or ridge. The gaps allow air, water, light, and perception to move through the rock mass. They reveal the work of erosion. They make each column legible. In Wulingyan, emptiness is not absence. It is the carved space that lets the stone forest be seen. Those gaps often began as fractures, widened by weathering and runoff. Water entered and moved downward. The sides of the fractures weakened and retreated. Material was removed by streams and gravity. Over long time, the openings became ravines, slot-like passages, and deep clefts. What remains between them is the pillar body, shaped as much by what surrounds it as by what it contains. You can feel this if you stand beside a narrow cleft and look upward. The walls may be only a short distance apart, but they rise high enough to make the opening feel like a vertical corridor. Moisture lingers there. Ferns may thrive in the shade. The sound of a drop falling can be magnified by the stone. The air is cooler, and the sky above is a thin, pale strip. The clustered pillars create many such microspaces: a sheltered nook at the base, a ledge garden halfway up, a narrow passage where mist moves like a slow breath, a high crown where wind combs through pine needles. Each space has its own conditions, and together they make the ecosystem unusually layered. Wulingyuan's strangeness is ecological as well as geological. The living creatures here do not need to be large or dramatic to matter. Insects move through moss. Small birds use the vertical forest as cover and passage. Plants colonize cracks. Fungi work quietly in fallen wood. The pillars provide surfaces, shade, moisture gradients, and isolation. Life answers the shape of the stone, and the stone is softened by life in return. As we walk near the cluster, the sound of the stream may fade behind rock, then return suddenly when a gap opens toward the valley. This shifting sound is another effect of the terrain. Pillars block, reflect, and channel noise. The landscape has acoustics, just as it has microclimates. Wulingyuan is strange even to the ear, making water seem near, then far, then hidden again. You may notice how your own imagined steps become slower in such a place. The path bends often. The view changes constantly but gently. There is always another pillar partly revealed, another crack, another ledge, another hanging vine. Nothing demands speed. The stone forest sets a pace by being too intricate to rush and too calm to resist. And as we pass through this gathering of towers, the morning mist begins to lift higher, showing the bases of pillars that had seemed to hover in cloud. When the mist lifts from the valley floor, it changes the story of the view. Pillars that looked weightless regain their bases. You see where they meet slopes, streams, shrubs, and fallen blocks. The dream becomes grounded. Wulingyuan remains strange, but now its strangeness has roots and footings. The towers are no longer floating islands. They are parts of a continuous, deeply carved terrain. This revealing can feel satisfying in a quiet way. The mind understands the illusion without losing affection for it. Mist hid the lower world, and now the lower world returns. The pillar stands on stone, soil, and time. Around its base, vegetation thickens. A ravine curves away. Water glints through leaves. The floating tower becomes a weathered remnant again, and both versions are true in their own moment. The bases of pillars often show the roughness of transition. They may broaden into slopes, disappear behind talus, or connect to walls partly concealed by forest. Erosion does not always make a perfect column from top to bottom. Some pillars taper, some merge into ridges. Some stand with irregular shoulders. This irregularity makes Wulingyuan feel more alive than a landscape of perfect shapes would. Nature rarely produces clean repetition for long. It varies because conditions vary. One crack carries more water. One face receives more sun. One ledge gathers more soil. One base is undercut more deeply by a stream. The pillars share a family resemblance, yet each has its own history of exposure and resistance. Their differences are part of the quiet pleasure of looking. You can let your attention move from base to summit. At the bottom there is shade, moss, and damp soil. Higher, there are vertical faces with streaks and cracks. Higher still, ledges hold shrubs. At the top, trees lean into the open air. The pillar becomes a complete vertical journey, a landscape compressed into one column of stone and life. This vertical journey reflects the larger descent of water. Rain touches the crown, nourishes summit plants, enters cracks, stains faces, feeds ledge gardens, reaches the base, and joins streams. The pillar is not merely an obstacle in the water cycle. It is a pathway. WULINGYUAN's towers guide water downward, and water gradually guides the towers into new forms. The lifted mist also reveals fallen material at the base. Blocks, pebbles, sand, and soil gather in shaded aprons. These are not interruptions to the beauty. They are evidence of ongoing transformation. The pillar is giving itself to the valley very slowly. The valley receives each piece and covers it with green. There is a deep gentleness in that exchange. As the morning opens, the colors become fuller. The sandstone warms slightly. Leaves brighten. The stream reflects small patches of sky. Yet the energy remains low and calm. WULINGYUAN in daylight can still feel like a place made for quiet, because the pillars hold so much shade and vertical space. Even with more light, the ravines keep their inward hush, and as the mist continues to rise, we look toward the higher cliffs, where the pillars still connect to ridges, showing the landscape in the middle of becoming. Not every form in WULINGYUAN is a freestanding pillar. Some are fins, walls, buttresses, and narrow ridges that have not yet been fully separated. These connected forms are important because they show the process continuing. They are like intermediate thoughts in stone, neither broad mountain nor isolated tower. You can see where future pillars may be outlined by cracks, waiting for water and time to deepen the spaces around them. A sandstone fin may extend from a ridge as a thin wall, its sides steep and its top forested. Joints cut across it. Small gullies work at its edges. From one angle, it looks like a cliff. From another, it begins to read as a row of connected columns. WULINGYUAN is full of these shifting identities, and they make the landscape feel unfinished in the most peaceful sense. This matters because it helps answer the question of strangeness without treating the pillars as static curiosities. They are part of a continuum of erosion. Broad uplands become dissected ridges. Ridges become fins. Fins become towers. Towers become narrower remnants. Remnants eventually fall, weather, and return to sediment. The strange shape is one moment in a long, graceful sequence. You can imagine standing before a connected wall and seeing the future hinted within it. Vertical cracks run down the face. Vegetation marks, ledges and damp lines. A small stream moves at the base. In deep time, those cracks may widen, and portions of the wall may stand apart. The landscape we admire now is still making more of itself, though the pace is beyond ordinary patience. The idea of future pillars is soothing because it removes the pressure of finality. WULINGYUAN is not finished with its beauty. It is not a museum piece sealed against change. It is a working landscape, still wet, still rooted, still lifting mist and loosening grains. Its strangeness continues to unfold even when no one is watching. The connected ridges also show how structure guides form. Where joints are widely spaced, larger blocks remain. Where joints are closer, narrower pillars can develop. Where bedding planes create weaker horizons, ledges may form. Where water concentrates, clefts deepen. The resulting terrain is like a slow collaboration between the original architecture of the rock and the weather's patient editing. From a distance, a ridge with emerging pillars may look like a comb of stone, with teeth rising along the skyline. Closer up, it becomes more complex. Trees cover some sections, mist hides others. Faces turn in and out of light. The line between ridge and pillar may change as you move, reminding you that landscapes are often less fixed than names make them seem. You and I can hold the names lightly. Pillar, cliff, ravine, ridge, forest, stream. They are useful words, but WULINGYUAN flows between them. A pillar is also a cliff. A ravine is also a form of fracture. A forest is also a weathering skin. A stream is also a sculptor. The more gently we name the place, the more fully it can remain itself. And as we follow the ridgeline in thought, the sunlight touches the upper crowns while the lower ravines stay cool, keeping both morning and night in the same view. That mingling of morning and night is one of Wulingyuan's quiet signatures. Up above, the pillar crowns may shine with soft gold, while the ravine floor remains blue, damp, and cool. You can feel the two temperatures at once in imagination, warmth touching the high leaves and shadow resting near your hands. The stone stands between them, carrying light on its upper faces and holding darkness in its cracks below. This vertical sharing of light makes the pillars feel taller than they are. Your eye moves from a shaded base to a bright crown, and in that movement it passes through weather, vegetation, and time. A smoother mountain slope might soften the transition, but Wulingyuan's steep quartz sandstone turns it into a clear ascent. The difference between valley and summit is not only distance, it is atmosphere. The trees high on the pillars wake before the moss in the ravines dries. Leaves on exposed crowns begin their daily work in the sun, while ferns below remain beaded with condensation. A bird crossing from one tower to another passes through this layered morning, from brightness into shadow and back again. You can sense how the ecosystem is arranged vertically, each height holding its own small climate. Geology made that verticality possible. The strong sandstone faces stand steeply, while fractures and streams have opened deep spaces around them. Because the walls drop so directly, light cannot reach every level at once. Shadows linger. Moisture remains. Temperature divides the landscape into quiet bands. Wulingyuan's strange shapes do not just look unusual. They change how the day itself moves through the forest. You may notice this most clearly along the shaded sides of the pillars. One face receives early light and begins to dry. Another remains cool and wet, supporting thicker moss. The same tower can hold different conditions on different sides, like several small worlds joined by one body of stone. A pillar is not a simple object. It is a climate, a habitat, a water route, and a record. This is why the more slowly you imagine Wulingyuan, the stranger it becomes. At first, the pillars are striking because they rise so high and narrow. Then they become stranger because of what they make possible: suspended forests, hidden ravines, mist pools, shaded ecosystems, and streams that have shaped the stone that shapes them in return. The wonder deepens as your pace slows. And as the sun moves higher, the shadows begin to draw back from the ravine floor, revealing small textures that were hidden under the blue quiet. The path beside us becomes easier to see. Damp stones hold pale reflections. Fine roots cross the earth like dark threads. Fallen leaves lie flat and glossy, their edges softened by water. The base of a Wulingyuan pillar rises nearby, not smooth, but marked by grooves, stains, and small shelves where soil has gathered. You can feel the roughness of the place without touching it. These lower textures are the intimate face of the same processes that made the towers. Weathering does not happen only high on dramatic cliffs. It happens in tiny hollows and shaded seams, where moisture lingers after rain. It happens under moss, behind roots, along the thin line where soil presses against sandstone. The great pillars depend on these small contacts, repeated beyond all counting. If you look at a damp patch of rock, you may see colors that are easy to miss from a distance. Pale gray quartz grains, brown stains from iron minerals, green films of moss and algae, dark lines where water runs. The surface is a quiet mixture of mineral and life. Wulingyuan stone is not separate from the forest. It is wrapped in it, touched by it, and slowly changed by it. This close view also shows how erosion can be selective. A slightly harder band may project as a ledge. A weaker zone may hollow back under the touch of water and roots. A crack may deepen while nearby stone remains firm. These differences accumulate into relief. At the scale of a hand, they are textures. At the scale of a valley, they are pillars, ravines, and cliff faces. You can rest with that shift in scale. The same principle works quietly from tiny to vast. Where rock resists, it stands. Where rock yields, space opens. Where water repeats, grooves deepen. Where roots hold, soil gathers. Wulingyuan's strange skyline is written in the same language as the damp stone beside the path, only enlarged by time. The stream now catches more light, and the water becomes clearer in our imagination. You can see rounded stones beneath the surface, some dark, some pale, some covered with green softness. Their shapes come from movement, but not hurry. They have been rolled, touched, and turned by water, slowly losing angles and joining the valley's smooth, quiet speech. Above the stream, the pillars remain steep and angular. That contrast is soothing. The water rounds what it carries, while the cliffs keep their vertical lines for much longer. In one view, Wulingyuan shows both the sharpness of resistant sandstone and the softness of sediment in motion. The landscape is not one texture. It is a conversation between edges and curves, and as the morning light reaches the stream, we follow its course deeper into the valley, where the water gathers the many small stories of the stone. A stream in Wulingyuan is not large in the way a great river is large. Its strength lies in persistence and placement. It follows low ground between pillars, receiving trickles from side ravines, seepage from cliff bases, and rainwater descending through the forest. You may hear it before you see it again, a soft running sound beneath leaves and the occasional hollow note where water passes over stone. The streambed holds pieces of the pillars in miniature, quartz grains, sandstone fragments, leaf stems, and small pebbles collect together in bars and pools. Some pieces have traveled only a short way from the cliff above. Others may have moved through several bends. Each one belongs to the slow dismantling and rearranging of the landscape. Wulingyuan's towers rise above, while their loosened particles move below. This downward movement is gentle to imagine. A grain leaves a ledge, a storm moves it. A quiet flow rests it in a pool, another rise of water carries it farther. There is no single dramatic moment. The valley is made by these intervals of motion and stillness. Water works, then waits. Sediment travels, then rests. The pillars change, then seem unchanged. You can feel why this rhythm belongs to sleep. It is steady, without being monotonous. The stream repeats, but every bend changes the sound. A narrow channel makes it brighter. A pool makes it slower. A stone lip gives it a soft falling note. A bed of sand quiets it again. The ear follows, and the mind begins to drift along the same path. The stream also cools the air near it. Moisture rises from the surface, and shaded vegetation holds that coolness close. If you imagine your hand near the water, the air feels fresher, touched by mineral and leaf. The pillars above may be warming in the sun, but down here the valley keeps a blue-green calm. Wulingyuan's vertical structure lets many hours of the day coexist. From time to time, the stream may pass beneath an overhanging wall. There, the sound deepens, and the stone seems to lean close without pressing. Ferns grow from cracks, their fronds arching toward the water. A few drops fall from high above, joining the flow after a long descent through air. The scene is small, yet it belongs completely to the making of the pillars. Where streams undercut slopes or remove weathered material, they help steepen the terrain. The pillars do not rise alone. They are revealed by the lowering of valleys. Running water carries away the loosened stone that gravity and weathering deliver to it. Without that removal, debris would gather and soften the relief. The stream keeps the spaces open, quietly maintaining the depth between towers. This is a slow partnership. Rain loosens, gravity delivers. Streams remove, vegetation slows some water, holds some soil, and opens some cracks. The sandstone resists in some places and yields in others. Wulingyuan's strangeness is not an accident, standing above the process. It is the shape of the process itself, visible in stone, water, roots, and mist. And as the stream curves through the valley, the pillars draw back for a moment, and the forest becomes denser, holding the stone in green shadow. In the denser forest, Wulingyuan feels less like a view and more like a shelter. The pillars are still nearby, but leaves interrupt them. Trunks, shrubs, and hanging vines soften the vertical walls into glimpses. Light reaches the ground in scattered pieces. The smell becomes richer, with damp soil, old leaves, bark, and the faint clean scent that comes after stone has been wet through the night. You may feel the air thicken with plant life. It is not heavy, just full. Every surface seems to hold moisture. Leaves overlap. Moss cushions fallen logs. Roots grip stones that may once have fallen from the cliffs above. The forest floor is a slow receiving place, taking what descends from the pillars and turning it into soil, shade, and new growth. This receiving is part of the ecosystem's quiet work. Fallen leaves decay and release nutrients. Soil builds in pockets protected from being washed away too quickly. Small organisms break down wood and organic matter. Plants use what the valley holds. The sandstone pillars may seem like the main figures, but the forest below is the soft body that receives their weathered fragments. Wulingyuan's strange beauty depends on that softness. If the pillars rose from bare ground, they would still be impressive, but the feeling would be different. The living forest makes the stone feel inhabited, not by human stories, but by ecological patience. It places green, damp, responsive life around ancient mineral forms, and the contrast makes both more vivid. As we move through the denser shade, the pillars sometimes appear as sudden pale walls beyond dark leaves. You see a vertical face for a breath, then the path bends and it is gone. This kind of partial revelation is gentler than a wide panorama. It lets the mind receive the landscape in small portions. A mossy base, a high ledge, a crack full of shadow, a tree crown against stone. The forest also controls how water reaches the ground. Leaves intercept rain, branches slow droplets, roots hold soil, litter absorbs moisture like a soft sponge. Then, water releases gradually, seeping towards streams and cracks. This slows the pace of erosion in some places, while concentrated flow still finds channels elsewhere. The ecosystem does not stop geology. It shapes the way geology continues. You can hear the forest's effect after rain. Instead of one sharp downpour hitting bare stone, there are many delayed drops. Water falls from leaf tips long after the sky has cleared. It patters softly on lower leaves, on moss, on stones, on the path. Wulingyuan keeps raining from itself. Even when the rain has ended, the pillars and trees both hold water, then let it go slowly. That slow release feels like breathing. The landscape takes in cloud and rain. It holds them in leaves, soil, cracks, and mist. Then it releases them through streams, drips, vapor, and seepage. The process repeats, and the pillars are shaped by that repetition. In the quiet forest, you can almost forget the scale, until a gap opens and a tower rises above you again. And as the forest opens into another clearing, the height returns, and Wulingyuan's pillars stand around us like weathered columns of an ancient roofless hall. The clearing is not large, but it changes the body's sense of space. After the close green shade, the sky appears wider, and several pillars come into view at once. Their faces are damp in streaks, their tops irregular with trees, their bases hidden behind shrubs and slopes. You can imagine standing still there, breathing slowly, while light falls between them in soft, slanting bands. These pillars may look like columns, but they were not built. Their columnar feeling comes from jointing and erosion, from the way vertical cracks divided the sandstone and water enlarged the divisions. Unlike carved columns, they are uneven, textured, and alive with vegetation. That unevenness is what makes them beautiful. Wulingyuan's architecture has no straight edge, only structure, weather, and time. Some faces may be nearly sheer, while others step inward along bedding planes. A ledge can catch soil and support a small tree. A crack can run dark from top to bottom. A slight overhang can shelter ferns beneath it. These variations interrupt the column shape, just enough to keep the towers from feeling artificial. They remain natural, irregular, and softly unpredictable. The clearing lets you see how the pillars relate to one another. They do not stand in rows. They cluster, separate, overlap, and recede. Their spacing records the hidden pattern of fractures and drainage. Where rock was more divided, more space opened. Where it was stronger or less fractured, larger masses remain. The view becomes a map of invisible structure made visible by erosion. You can imagine the sun moving slowly across the clearing. A bright patch touches one pillar face, then lowers or shifts as the hour changes. Shadows from trees drift across sandstone. Mist near the ground thins into clear air. The towers remain still, yet the light makes them feel gently animated, as if the day is reading them one surface at a time. The word quartz gives another layer to this calm. Quartz is familiar as a mineral, but here it is not a single crystal held in the hand. It is countless grains bound into sandstone, forming cliffs and towers. The pillars are strange because something as small and ordinary as sand has become immense, and something as hard as quartz has become part of a soft, misty forest. That contrast is especially restful. The mind can hold the small grain and the tall tower together. It can feel the continuity between them. Wulingyuan shows that scale is not a barrier between things. A pillar is made from grains. A ravine is made from drops. A forest is made from leaves. A calm night is made from many quiet breaths, and as the clearing gives way to another shaded bend, the pillars become partly hidden again, and their mystery returns without effort. Hiddenness is important in Wulingyuan. The landscape never gives itself all at once for long. A view opens, then trees close around it. Mist reveals, then covers. A path rises toward a lookout, then turns into a ravine where the sky becomes narrow. This rhythm of seeing and not seeing keeps the place quiet. It prevents the mind from becoming overwhelmed by grandeur. You can walk with that rhythm in your breathing. Open view, slow inhale. Shaded path, slow exhale. Pillar in light, inhale. Misted ravine, exhale. The landscape seems to offer a natural pattern for rest. It alternates spaciousness with enclosure, brightness with cool shadow, stone height with forest closeness. Each shift is gradual enough to soothe rather than startle. The science of visibility here is simple, but its effect is deep. Humidity scatters light. Vegetation blocks and frames views. Ravines limit sight lines. Pillars overlap, hiding one another from certain angles. The same landscape can feel open, enclosed, immense or intimate depending on where you stand. Wulingyuan's strangeness is partly spatial, created by the way stone controls what the eye can know. This makes every pillar relational. A tower's shape is not only its own outline, it is also the gap beside it, the mist behind it, the trees in front of it, the shadow at its base, and the cliff that hides part of it. You rarely see a pillar as an isolated specimen. You see it in conversation with air, forest, water, and other stone. That conversation changes through the day. In morning, mist makes pillars seem suspended. At noon, stronger light reveals textures and steep faces. In evening, shadows lengthen and simplify the forms. After rain, wet surfaces darken. In dry light, quartz-rich faces may look paler. The pillars are the same, but the atmosphere keeps retelling them in a softer voice. You may notice that the word strange has become warmer now. At first it may have meant unusual, even improbable, but after walking through the imagined ravines, the strangeness feels more like intimacy with deep time. Wulingyuan is strange because it lets you stand inside processes usually too slow to sense. It turns erosion into a place you can breathe in. This breathing place holds no urgency. The path continues, but we do not need to reach an end. The pillars continue beyond what we see. The stream continues beyond what we hear. The rock continues beneath the soil and behind the mist. You can rest inside continuation itself, trusting that the landscape does not need to be finished for the mind to be at peace. And as we drift farther through the shade, the pillar walls become cooler again, and the day's warmth remains high above the ravine. The coolness near the wall is not only imagined comfort. Steep shaded faces receive less direct sun, and damp surfaces lose heat differently than exposed dry rock. Air moving along the ravine can feel chilled by water, shade and stone. You might sense it as a quiet change against your skin, the way a room feels different when you step closer to an old stone wall. This coolness helps certain plants thrive. Mosses remain green where direct sun might dry them. Ferns keep their delicate fronds open in humid pockets. Small seedlings find protection in cracks and shaded soil. The pillar does not merely stand over these plants. It shelters them with its height and orientation. Wulingyuan's geology makes climates small enough to fit in a crevice. On a sunlit face, conditions may be different. Water dries faster. Plants must tolerate more exposure. The rock warms. In a single pillar, one side may be damp and moss-rich, while another is brighter and more sparsely vegetated. This creates a patchwork of habitats wrapped around a vertical core. The tower becomes a world with directions, seasons, and moods. You and I can imagine following that patchwork with our eyes. A dark green seam climbs where water seeps. A pale dry face opens beside it. A ledge supports shrubs. A vine descends into shade. A pine root enters a crack near the top. Each feature marks a local condition. The pillar is not mute. It speaks through texture, moisture, and growth. The cool ravine air also keeps sound gentle. Dense vegetation absorbs sharpness. Moist air seems to soften distance. The stream's voice remains rounded. Even footsteps feel quieter on damp ground. In Wulingyuan, the senses are often cushioned by water in one form or another. Mist in the air, moisture in moss, stream flow over stone, and rain held in leaf litter. That cushioning is part of the sleepfulness of the landscape. Hard stone exists everywhere, but it is surrounded by soft effects. Mist softens sight, moss softens touch, water softens sound, shade softens temperature, leaves soften the ground. The quartz pillars are firm and ancient, yet the world around them is hushed, layered, and gentle. The strange thing, then, is not only that stone has become tall, it is that tall stone has become soothing. Wulingyuan does not feel like a hard landscape. Despite the vertical cliffs, it feels like stone wrapped in breath. The pillars rise from green shade into pale mist, and their strength gives the softness a place to gather. And as we keep moving beside the cool wall, a narrow opening ahead shows a slice of distant pillars, blue with haze and almost transparent. Distant pillars in Wulingyuan can look less like rock than memory. Through a narrow opening, they appear as blue-gray forms, their details erased by moisture and distance. They seem layered one behind another, fading until the farthest towers are nearly the same color as the sky. You know they are stone, but the eye receives them as atmosphere. This fading is a gentle lesson in scale. The pillars are large enough to remain visible across valleys, but the air is thick enough with humidity to soften them. Distance does not simply shrink them, it transforms them. It turns texture into tone, and edges into suggestion. Wulingyuan becomes a place where geology and weather share the act of seeing. The blue haze comes from light scattering through air and moisture. It is a common effect in humid mountain regions, yet among Wulingyuan's vertical pillars it feels especially strange. Each tower becomes a layer in the atmosphere. The landscape seems to have depth you can breathe, not only depth you can measure. The farther you look, the softer the stone becomes. You may feel your attention naturally moving toward those far pillars, then returning to the nearer wall. Near stone gives detail. Far stone gives calm. Near stone shows grains, roots, and cracks. Far stone gives shapes that ask nothing. The mind moves between them like the stream moving between pools and small falls, active for a moment, then still again. This alternation helps keep the journey unhurried. If we stayed only with close detail, the mind might become too alert. If we stayed only with distant haze, it might lose the place entirely. Wulingyuan offers both. The rough sandstone beside you anchors the body. The pale towers beyond let the mind drift. Together, they make a quiet balance for sleep. The distant pillars also remind us that the processes we have been tracing are not local to one tower. They repeat across the terrain: jointed sandstone, humid weathering, stream incision, vegetation in cracks, mist in valleys. Each pillar has its own particulars, but the broader pattern continues. The strangeness belongs to a whole landscape, not a single famous view. As the haze shifts, one far tower may briefly sharpen. A sunbeam touches its face. A line of trees appears on its crown. Then mist passes, and it softens again. This temporary clarity can feel very peaceful. It mirrors the way thoughts appear during rest, become clear for a moment, then dissolve without needing to be followed. And as that far pillar dissolves back into blue air, we continue through the green corridor, letting the path carry us toward the sandstone's older memory of pressure and burial. Pressure is a quiet maker. Long before Wulingyuan's pillars stood in mist, the sediments that became them lay buried under other layers. Grain pressed against grain, water moved through pore spaces, minerals precipitated and cemented the sand. The loose material became rock, not through haste, but through the steady weight of what rested above it. The pillars began in compression before they became towers of open air. You can feel the contrast in that history. The sandstone was once confined, held in darkness, part of a continuous mass. Now it stands exposed, with air on its faces and trees on its summits. What was pressed together has been opened. What was buried has been lifted into light. Wulingyuan's strangeness is partly the release of old depth into visible height. The cement between quartz grains is essential. Without it, the sand would not stand. With it, the rock gains enough strength to hold cliffs and resist weathering. But cement can vary. Some zones are stronger, others weaker. These differences influence how the rock breaks, weathers, and forms ledges. Even within a pillar, strength is not perfectly uniform. The tower is a record of subtle internal variation. This helps explain why pillar faces are textured rather than smooth. Weathering exposes beds, joints, harder layers, and weaker zones. Water darkens some parts and leaves others pale. Plants colonize the surfaces where conditions allow. The final form is a compromise between the rock's internal fabric and the external forces touching it. Wulingyuan's pillars are shaped from within and without. The burial history also means that the pillars contain time before the current landscape existed. The ravines are relatively young compared with the sedimentary story inside the rock. The visible towers are a late expression of an older material. This layering of ages gives the place depth beyond its physical height. A single cliff face holds ancient sand and more recent weathering in one view. You may imagine the pressure easing as uplift brings rock closer to the surface. Fractures form or open more easily. Water begins to enter. The once buried sandstone meets air, rain, roots, and temperature. It is like a long-held breath being released through cracks, valleys, and pillars. The landscape exhales into shape over ages. There is something restful in thinking of stone this way. It was held, it changed slowly, it emerged, it opened. The process feels almost like sleep turning into morning, except stretched across geological time. Wulingyuan's towers are not abrupt creations. They are awakenings of buried sand, revealed by water and held upright by their own mineral patience. And as we leave that buried memory behind, the present forest returns around us, with leaves trembling lightly, and the scent of warm, damp stone rising from the path. The scent of warm, damp stone is subtle, but in Wulingyuan, it belongs to the whole atmosphere. After morning light reaches the cliff faces, surfaces begin to dry unevenly. Some remain dark and wet in shade. Others grow lighter where warmth reaches them. The air near those warming faces carries mineral notes mixed with moss, leaves, and the faint sweetness of living wood. You can imagine walking close enough to sense these shifts. One step brings cool shade. Another brings a patch of warmer air where sunlight has touched the path. The pillars make this patchwork because they block and reflect light in complex ways. A ravine is never evenly lit. It is a moving arrangement of shadow, glow, and green reflection. Green reflection matters too. Light bouncing from leaves can color the stone softly, especially in enclosed places. A pale sandstone face may seem faintly green under the canopy. Mist may brighten that green, while wet surfaces deepen it. Wulingyuan's colors are often quiet, but they are layered. Mineral gray, warm tan, leaf green, shadow blue, and the pale white of cloud caught between towers. This restrained palette helps the landscape feel sleep-friendly. There is no harsh brightness in our telling, no sudden blaze. Even in daylight, the pillars carry muted tones. The most luminous moments come from mist and reflected light rather than sharp glare. The eye can move comfortably, receiving shape and color without strain. The forest canopy above the path filters the sun into moving fragments. A leaf shifts, and a small brightness slides across stone. A branch stirs, and the pattern changes. These tiny motions happen against the almost unmoving pillars, making the stillness feel deeper. Wulingyuan's towers do not need to move, because everything around them moves gently enough to show their patience. Sometimes a vine hangs from a ledge so high that its lower end disappears into leaves below. It traces the vertical nature of the place with a living line. Sometimes roots grip a crack where soil seems impossibly thin. Sometimes a shrub grows from a narrow shelf and leans outward toward light. These plants show how the forest has learned the grammar of stone. The grammar is simple but demanding. Hold where you can. Use moisture when it comes. Grow slowly if the soil is thin. Bend toward light. Send roots into shadow. Wulingyuan's plants do not fight the pillars. They inhabit the opportunities that the pillars create. Their presence makes the stone feel less lonely and the cliffs more intimate. You can carry that intimacy with you as the path climbs slightly. The stream sound lowers behind us. The air becomes a little warmer. Through branches, a pillar top appears almost level with the eye for a moment, covered in small trees and shrubs. It is a sudden reminder that what looked unreachable from below is also a surface, a place where rain falls and life gathers. And as the path rises, we begin to see the pillar crowns not as distant silhouettes, but as quiet hilltops separated by deep air. A pillar crown, in Wulingyuan, can be a small world. It may hold weathered sandstone, thin soil, shrubs, pines, grasses, and moss in shaded hollows. Its edges drop away steeply, so the life on top is both connected to the wider forest by seeds and air, and separated by vertical distance. From nearby, it feels less like the top of a column and more like a tiny upland. This is another reason the pillars feel strange. They compress the idea of a mountain into a narrow form. Base, cliff, ledge, slope, summit, and forest all exist within one tower. A bird can cross between crowns easily, while a seed may land on one and not another. Moisture may linger on one top and dry quickly on the next. Each crown has its own quiet conditions. The soil on such crowns is often thin because rain can wash material away, and the surface area is limited. Yet organic matter accumulates where plants already grow. Roots help hold it. Fallen needles and leaves decay into dark pockets. Over time, a small ecological cushion forms. It may be modest, but it is enough for life adapted to restraint. You can imagine kneeling near such a patch, though we keep safely in the realm of thought. The soil would be cool under shade, granular with bits of weathered sandstone and organic matter. Pine needles might lie in soft layers. Moss would hold tiny beads of water. The edge nearby would drop into mist, and the stillness would feel lifted above the world. From a crown, the surrounding pillars may appear as neighboring islands. The valleys between them are not water but air, shadow, forest, and cloud. This island-like feeling contributes to Wulingyuan's dreamlike quality. It suggests separation without loneliness. Each tower stands apart, yet all share the same weather, the same sandstone origin, and the same slow conversation with rain. Ecologically, isolation can shape what grows where. A seed must arrive, a suitable crack or soil pocket must receive it. Conditions must allow it to survive. Over time, different crowns may develop subtly different plant communities. Wulingyuan's vertical terrain creates many chances for variation, even within the same broad forest environment. The pillar crowns also influence erosion below. Vegetation on top can slow runoff and help water enter cracks gradually. But roots can also pry into fractures, and concentrated drainage may emerge along specific lines. The summit is not just a cap, it is part of the water system, feeding the streaks, seeps, and weathered lines that mark the faces below. Looking across the crowns, you can sense the whole landscape breathing upward. Mist rises from valleys and brushes the trees. Sunlight warms the needles. Drops fall from branches after fog. The towers hold these small worlds in the air, and the deep spaces between them make even ordinary shrubs feel suspended. Wulingyuan turns modest vegetation into something almost celestial, simply by placing it high on stone. And as we let the crown-level view widen, the valleys below soften again. and the pillars become a vast, uneven sea of green-topped sandstone. The phrase sea of stone can feel especially fitting here. Though there is no ocean around us, the pillar tops rise like waves that have become still, each one capped with forest and separated by mist-filled troughs. You can let your eyes drift from one to another without counting. Wulingyuan spreads outward in repetitions too varied to become mechanical and too gentle to become overwhelming. From this higher view, the role of valleys becomes clearer. They are the spaces that make the pillars visible. They hold mist, streams, shade, and the cooler air of morning. They separate the towers enough for each one to stand in the eye. Without the valleys, the sandstone would be a plateau or ridge. With them, it becomes a forest of vertical remnants. Valleys deepen when streams cut downward and slopes retreat. This happens gradually, with episodes of faster and slower change depending on climate, water flow, and material strength. In Wulingyuan, humid conditions and fractured sandstone give water many opportunities to work. The result is a terrain that has been dissected into dramatic relief while remaining softened by forest. You can imagine the valleys as slow negative sculptures. They are not empty. They are full of air, leaves, roots, water, and shadow. But they mark where stone has been removed. Every mist-filled gap is a record of absence made beautiful. The pillars stand because the spaces around them have been opened, and the open spaces give the whole landscape its airy calm. This idea of absence can be comforting. Much of beauty comes from what is no longer there. A ravine is beautiful because material has been carried away. A pillar is beautiful because surrounding stone has retreated. A view is beautiful because mist hides some parts and reveals others. Wulingyuan teaches that removal can create shelter, depth, and wonder. The green crowns soften the sea-like view. They break the stone into living tops, each one holding leaves in light. Some crowns are rounded and dense. Some are sparse. Some lean with wind. Some merge visually with nearby slopes. The forest turns the pillars from bare remnants into habitats, and the habitats make the stone feel quietly inhabited by natural processes rather than empty spectacle. A breeze may move across the crowns like a slow ripple. Needles stir. Leaves turn their pale undersides. Mist threads upward from one valley and dissolves near another. The pillars remain still beneath this movement, but the living surfaces shimmer faintly. You can feel how the landscape holds both firmness and breath, stone below, green motion above. The view invites the mind to widen, then soften. There is too much to name, so naming falls away. Pillars, valleys, crowns, mist, streams and light become one field of calm attention. You are still with Wulingyuan, still within its particular geology, but the details begin to merge in the way details merge when sleep comes closer. And as the wide view settles, we begin to sink again in thought, following a line of mist down from the crowns into the shaded ravines below. The mist descends without weight. It slides along pillar faces, gathers under trees, and settles in the lower corridors where sunlight arrives late. You can follow it downward like a slow veil, from crown to ledge to crack to base. As it moves, it touches every part of the vertical landscape, making the tall sandstone feel connected by one soft breath of water. Mist is made from tiny droplets suspended in air, but in Wulingyuan it feels almost architectural. It fills the spaces that erosion has opened. It reveals the shape of ravines by occupying them. It hides the bases of pillars and brightens the gaps between them. It makes distance visible as softness. The stone carved by water is now joined by water in another form. This is part of the quiet circularity of the place. Water laid down the sand long ago. Water helped cement and later expose the stone through larger geological processes. Rain and streams carved the valleys. Mist now returns to the spaces carved by water. Wulingyuan is full of water changing roles, and every role is slow enough to belong to sleep. Following mist downward, we pass ledges where shrubs hold droplets on leaves. We pass dark cracks where moisture lingers after dry weather. We pass vertical streaks that show repeated runoff. We pass moss that feels almost luminous in shade. the descent is gentle, not a plunge, because the landscape itself breaks height into many small resting places. At the base, the mist thickens near the stream. Cool air settles there. The water continues its quiet movement, receiving drips from stone and condensation from leaves. The ravine floor seems to breathe upward, sending pale vapor back toward the towers. You can feel the cycle in your own breathing. Down into stillness, up into softness, down again. This cycle helps weather the pillars even when no heavy rain falls. Moisture keeps surfaces damp. Dampness supports biological growth. Biological growth affects the rock surface. Small temperature changes and wetting-drying cycles add subtle stress. None of this acts alone, and none of it works quickly. But Wulingyuan's form is made from the accumulation of slow influences, each returning in its season. The mist also changes how you feel your place in the landscape. When visibility narrows, nearby details become more important. A leaf with one droplet, a dark root across the path, a stone slick with water. The immense pillars become partial presences behind the veil. The mind rests in the near world, while knowing the tall world remains around it. This is a useful kind of rest. You do not need to hold all of Wulingyuan at once. The landscape is too layered for that. Instead, you can receive one scale at a time. A droplet, a moss patch, a crack, a pillar face, a valley, a distant cluster. The mind descends and rises through scale as gently as mist, and as the mist settles into the ravine, the sound of water grows clearer again, guiding us toward the hidden channels that keep carving the sandstone in darkness. Hidden channels are easy to miss because they do not always announce themselves. A little water may run beneath leaves, under stones, or inside a narrow crack at the base of a cliff. You may hear a faint trickle without seeing it. In Wulingyuan, these small flows matter. They carry moisture through the landscape's secret roots, linking slopes, pillars, and streams. A hidden channel can begin where rain collects on a ledge. Water slips into a fracture, follows the path downward, emerges lower on the face, and disappears into soil. Another flow begins under moss, where dampness gathers and seeps along the rock. Another runs only after storms, briefly waking a dry groove into motion. Each channel is temporary or persistent in its own quiet way. These small water paths help widen cracks and remove loosened grains. They also create places for plants to root. A seep line may become a green line on a cliff. A damp groove may support moss. A crevice with steady moisture may hold ferns. Over time, living growth marks the water roots, and the water roots mark the stone. Wulingyuan's walls become maps of hidden flow. You can imagine tracing one such green seam upward with your eyes. It begins near a shaded base, climbs through a crack, passes a ledge, and disappears behind a curtain of leaves. The seam is not perfectly straight. It follows the rock's weakness, the angle of bedding, the pull of gravity, and the places where moisture can remain. It is a slow signature of the pillar's internal structure. In dry weather, these lines may be less active, but their traces remain. Plants keep their hold. Mineral stains stay on the surface. Slight grooves preserve the memory of runoff. When rain returns, the lines darken and awaken. Wulingyuan's pillars change mood with the weather, but they do not begin again each time. They resume old pathways. The hidden channels also remind us that erosion can be inward before it is visible outward. Water working inside cracks may weaken rock that still looks solid from the outside. Roots may deepen into those same spaces. Freeze and thaw may play a lesser but present role in cooler periods or higher exposed areas. The pillar face we see is only the outer expression of changes moving through openings within it. Still, the mood remains calm. These inner changes are not presented as threat, they are the normal life of stone exposed to weather. Wulingyuan's pillars are not failing in a dramatic sense. They are participating in landscape. They stand because they resist, and they change because nothing at the surface of the earth is completely sealed from air, water, and time. You can listen to the hidden trickle as if it were a small clock. It does not tick, it murmurs. It measures not seconds but contact. Water touching stone. Stone releasing grains. Grains moving into the stream. The rhythm is too slow for ordinary counting, And that is exactly why it soothes. It belongs to time that does not hurry us, and as the hidden water continues beneath leaves and stone, the ravine opens once more, and Wulingyuan's pillars rise in a pale wall ahead, their tops lost in cloud. A pale wall of pillars can feel almost like a curtain at first. Several towers stand close enough that their forms overlap, and mist gathers near their crowns. The bases are hidden by forest. The middle faces show streaks, cracks, ledges, and darker patches where plants cling. The tops vanish into cloud, so height becomes suggestion rather than measurement. You look up, and the eye rests before it reaches an end. This loss of the top is important. It makes the pillars feel unfinished, as if they continue beyond sight into a quieter air. In reality, they have crowns, trees, and edges like any landform. But cloud removes the boundary. Wulingyuan becomes a place where stone enters weather and weather returns as water. The pillar and the sky seem to meet without a hard line. The wall-like view also shows that not all pillars are fully isolated. Some stand in close groups, separated by narrow clefts that are hidden from a distance. Others are attached to larger rock masses behind them. This makes the landscape complex. A tower that appears freestanding from one angle may reveal a connection from another. Wulingyuan's forms shift as the path shifts, and certainty stays soft. Geologically, this shifting appearance reflects the incomplete and uneven nature of erosion. The sandstone is being dissected, but not uniformly. Some fractures have widened deeply, while others remain narrow. Some blocks have been separated, while others retain bridges or ridges. The result is a landscape in many stages, with pillars emerging, standing, narrowing, and eventually returning to slope and sediment. You can feel the comfort of that ongoingness. A landscape in process does not demand a final pose. It can be many things at once: wall, pillar, ridge, cliff, ravine, and forested crown. Wulingyuan's strange beauty lies in these overlapping identities. The place does not resolve into one simple shape, and so the mind does not need to resolve either. The cloud at the top sends down fine moisture. It beads on needles and leaves. It darkens the upper stone. It may feed tiny streams that begin out of sight and appear lower as wet streaks. The unseen summit is still active, still sending water into the visible world. What we cannot see continues to participate in what we can. This is true of the rock's history as well. We cannot see the ancient burial, the deep pressure, the first formation of joints, or the earliest incision of streams. But their effects are here, standing in mist. Much of Wulingyuan's present beauty comes from processes hidden in time, just as the top of the pillar may be hidden in cloud. You can let that hiddenness remain. Sleep does not require complete visibility. It often comes more easily when edges soften and the mind no longer insists on reaching every summit. The pillars vanish upward. The stream continues below. The forest breathes around us. The strange quartz sandstone landscape holds more than we can see, and that is enough. And as cloud lowers over the upper faces, the world becomes quieter again, drawing our attention back to the slow pulse of rain that shaped these towers season after season. Rain in Wulingyuan can arrive softly, with tiny drops that seem to form from the air itself. It may begin as a darkening of leaves, a fresher scent rising from the ground, a slight thickening of the stream's voice. The pillars receive it without motion. Their faces deepen in color. Cracks become black lines. Moss brightens. The whole landscape leans into moisture. A gentle rain shows the sandstone's textures beautifully. Water follows ledges, pauses in hollows, and travels down established paths. It reveals the grain of the rock by darkening it unevenly. It makes bedding lines more visible where different layers absorb and shed water differently. In Wulingyuan, rain does not cover the geology. It traces it. You may imagine standing under tree cover as the rain begins. Drops strike leaves above, then fall in larger, slower drops to the path. The sound is layered, soft on moss, clearer on stone, delicate on the stream surface. The air smells of wet bark, mineral faces, and the green freshness of plants opening to water. Nothing needs to happen quickly. Over time, rainwater can be slightly acidic from carbon dioxide and organic acids in soil and decaying leaves. Though quartz itself resists chemical weathering, other minerals and cements can be affected. The water also works mechanically, entering pores and cracks, loosening grains, transporting particles, and assisting roots. Its power lies less in intensity than in recurrence. It returns, and returns, and returns. This recurrence is the heartbeat of Wulingyuan's formation. Each rainy season renews the contact between atmosphere and rock. Each dry interval leaves traces. Each storm carries sediment. Each misty morning keeps surfaces damp. The pillars stand in a climate that does not forget them. Moisture keeps visiting, and the stone keeps answering in tiny changes. Rain also nourishes the forest that nourishes weathering. More plant life means more roots, more organic matter, more shaded dampness, and more complexity in runoff. Forest cover can protect slopes from rapid stripping, while also contributing to rock breakdown in cracks and ledges. Wulingyuan's ecology and geology are not separate chapters. They are braided together like small streams joining in a ravine. You can watch a line of water slide down a pillar face and feel how gentle it seems. It is thin, almost transparent, catching light for a moment before disappearing behind moss. Yet multiplied by countless lines, across countless rains, through vast time, such movement helps carve the spaces around the towers. The smallness is not a contradiction, it is the method. The rain may pass after a while, leaving the forest dripping. Mist lifts from warmed stone. The stream runs a little fuller. The pillars remain dark and shining, as if freshly remembered by the weather. In that after-rain quiet, Wulingyuan feels especially ancient and new at once, washed by the present and shaped by all the rains before it. And as the last drops fall from the leaves, the air clears slightly, and the sandstone faces begin to glow with a subdued rain-dark warmth. After rain, colors deepen before they fade again. The sandstone becomes richer, with gray and brown tones warmed by moisture. Moss turns brighter. Leaves look polished. The stream reflects the pillars in broken pieces, each ripple carrying a fragment of vertical stone. You can feel the whole landscape softened, not blurred now, but renewed into clearer textures. This clarity after rain helps reveal the pillars' surfaces. Cracks stand out as dark veins. Ledges catch water. Small plants seem more visible against wet rock. Even distant towers may appear sharper if the rain has cleared some haze from the air. Wulingyuan changes by weather, and each change teaches another aspect of the same slow form. The wet faces also show how gravity guides water straight down where the rock allows it. On near vertical cliffs, runoff may fall quickly along grooves, while on ledges it pauses and spreads. Where bedding planes project, water may drip from edges. Where fractures open, it disappears inward. The pillar becomes a vertical drainage system, with every surface giving water a different instruction. Those instructions matter over time. A repeated drip can hollow a small spot. A seep can keep a line damp enough for moss. A ledge can collect sediment and organic matter. A crack can become wider through weathering and root growth. Wulingyuan's towers are shaped by countless decisions made by water as it responds to stone. Of course, water has no intention, and that makes the result even more peaceful. There is no striving in it. Water moves where it can. Stone resists where it can. Plants grow where they can. The landscape emerges from these simple permissions. The strange pillars are not forced into being. They are allowed by conditions, revealed by patience, and held for a while in the forest air. You can carry that feeling into your own rest. There is no need to force sleep. You can let it find the openings, the quiet cracks, the shaded ledges of the mind. Like mist entering a ravine, like water following sandstone, calm can move where there is space. Wulingyuan becomes not only a place we imagine, but a slow pattern the body can follow. The after-rain warmth remains subtle. Sunlight touches wet stone and rises as a faint vapor. The smell of minerals and leaves becomes more rounded. The stream, now a little fuller, smooths its voice over the stones. The pillars stand with renewed darkness in their cracks and brightness along their edges, carrying both shadow and light in the same breath. And as that breath moves through the valley, we turn toward the deeper question again: why these pillars feel so unlike ordinary cliffs, even though they are made from the same patient materials of Earth. Ordinary cliffs often present a boundary. They stand as an edge between high ground and low ground. Wulingyuan's quartz pillars do something different. They multiply the edge until the whole landscape becomes a field of boundaries. Every tower has several faces. Every ravine has several walls. Every gap is an entrance into another arrangement of stone and shade. The cliff is no longer a line. It has become a forest. This multiplication changes how you experience the land. Instead of looking at one wall, you move among many vertical surfaces. Instead of seeing a mountain from outside, you feel surrounded by its separated pieces. The terrain becomes walkable depth. You can be inside the geology, under it, beside it, and looking across it all at once. Wulingyuan makes stone spatial in a remarkably intimate way. The pillars also differ from many cliffs because they have crowns. A cliff edge may support a forest above, but a pillar carries its forest visibly on top, like a small green world lifted into air. This makes the tower feel complete and self-contained, even when it is geologically connected to larger patterns. You see its base, its face, its summit, and its life in one vertical figure. Their abundance matters too. One pillar would be unusual. Many pillars create an environment. The repetition turns surprise into atmosphere. At first, the mind says, "How strange." Then, after seeing tower after tower, it accepts the strangeness as the local order. Wulingyuan teaches you a new normal, where vertical sandstone and suspended forest are simply how the world breathes. This new normal is soothing, because it releases the need to compare constantly. After a while, the pillars are not oddities. They are companions in the landscape. You pass one, then another. Each has a different face, but all share the same calm origin. The unfamiliar becomes familiar without losing wonder. That is a beautiful condition for sleep. The science supports this feeling. The pillars are not exceptions to natural law. They are expressions of it under particular conditions. Strong quartz sandstone, vertical jointing, uplifted terrain, humid climate, active streams, biological weathering, and long time scales combined to make a rare but understandable landform. Wulingyuan is strange because the combination is uncommon, not because it is impossible. Understanding that can make the place feel more peaceful. The world is capable of such forms without breaking its own rules. Given patience, ordinary processes can become extraordinary landscapes. Sand can become stone. Cracks can become ravines. Rain can reveal towers. Forest can climb cliffs. Mist can make pillars appear to float above valleys. And as we let that answer settle gently, the path bends toward a quieter side valley, where the pillars stand farther apart, and the air feels wider between them. In the side valley, the space opens. The pillars are still tall, but they do not crowd the path as closely. There is more sky between them, more light reaching the understory, more room for the eye to wander. The stream here may be smaller, braided through stones and roots, with quiet pools that hold reflections of leaves and pale sandstone. You can feel the landscape loosen around you. Farther apart, the pillars reveal their individual shapes more clearly. One may be broad at the base and narrow toward the top. Another may be nearly rectangular, with straight faces and a flat crown. Another may have a broken profile, ledged and irregular, where bedding and weathering have made steps in the stone. Wulingyuan is never one shape repeated exactly. It is a family of related forms. This variety comes from local differences, joint spacing, bedding characteristics, exposure, drainage patterns, and vegetation all influence how a pillar develops. A crack that widens on one side may isolate a tower more deeply. A stream near the base may remove material faster. A shaded face may remain damp longer. Each pillar is a record of its own small conditions within the wider geological setting. You can imagine standing in the side valley and turning slowly, the view changes gently with each direction. Behind us, close forest and a darker ravine. Ahead, pale pillars spaced against mist. To one side, a wall where future columns may be forming. To the other, a slope of mossy blocks and roots. The place feels open, but still held. The wider air allows more birdsong, or at least the sense of it, to move across the valley. Sound travels between towers, softens in leaves, and returns as faint echoes. The stream's voice is lighter here. Wind reaches the crowns more easily. The sensory field becomes less enclosed and more airy, but it remains calm because every sound is buffered by distance and vegetation. This valley shows another mood of Wulingyuan. Not all of it is deeply shadowed or heavily misted. Some places feel open and almost floating with daylight. Yet the same processes remain. The pillars stand because water carved around them. Their surfaces are marked by rain and roots. Their crowns hold small forests. Their bases release sediment into the valley floor. The openness lets us see the relationship between pillar height and valley depth. The towers may not have grown upward in the way trees grow. Instead, the land around them has been cut downward and back, leaving them exposed. This inversion is one of the most important ideas in understanding Wulingyuan. What looks like upward reaching is often the result of downward carving. You can hold that thought as a soft reversal. The pillars seem to rise, but the valleys have sunk. The towers seem separate, but they began connected. The stone seems still, but it is slowly changing. The mist seems to hide, but it also reveals depth. Wulingyuan is full of gentle reversals, and each one makes the landscape feel more dreamlike. And as the side valley carries us onward, the light lowers again in our imagined day, and afternoon begins to soften the edges of the stone. Afternoon light in Wulingyuan can feel warm without becoming harsh. It slants along pillar faces, bringing out textures that morning mist concealed. Cracks cast longer shadows. Ledges glow briefly. Trees on the crowns become dark outlines against brighter air. The valley floor remains cool in places, but the upper stone takes on a quiet warmth, like an old surface remembering the sun. This is a good hour to notice relief. Shadows reveal the unevenness of the sandstone. A groove becomes visible. A projecting band stands out. A recessed layer falls into shade. The pillar face is no longer just a vertical plane. It becomes a landscape of small slopes, shelves, and hollows. Wulingyuan's towers contain miniature terrains on their sides. These small terrains matter for both weathering and life. A tiny shelf can hold dust and leaf fragments. A hollow can hold moisture. A rough patch gives moss a place to begin. A crack gives roots a path inward. Over time, the face of a pillar becomes more than exposed rock. It becomes a vertical ground, difficult and thin, but full of opportunities. You may see how plants emphasize the shape. Moss darkens damp grooves. Shrubs mark ledges. Vines follow cracks. A tree growing from a high pocket draws the eye to a hidden shelf that might otherwise disappear in the stone's texture. Life helps us read the geology by showing where the rock holds water, soil, and space. The afternoon also reveals how pillars cast shadows onto one another. One tower may darken the face of a nearby cliff. A narrow gap may stay cool because sunlight rarely enters deeply. A ravine may hold shadow even when the slopes above are bright. The pillars create a shifting sundial across the forest, measuring the day in darkness and light. This movement of shadow is another gentle rhythm. It is visible change without hurry. As the sun lowers, the pillars lengthen across the valley in shade. The stream moves through alternating bands of brightness and cool blue. Leaves shine briefly, then darken again. The landscape seems to turn itself down slowly, preparing for evening long before evening fully arrives. In that lowering light, Wulingyuan feels especially old. The sandstone faces show their grain, but softly. The forest grows quieter. The air begins to cool near the ravine floor. Mist may not have returned yet, but the conditions for it are gathering. Moisture waits in leaves, soil, streams, and shaded stone. The day is beginning its slow descent, and as the afternoon shadows reach farther across the valley, we follow them toward the bases of the pillars. where dusk will gather first. Dusk gathers first, where the pillars meet the forest floor. It pools in the roots, settles under ferns, and fills the narrow spaces between fallen stones. The high crowns of Wulingyuan still hold a little pale light, but below them the ravines have already entered their softer hour, where water sounds closer and every surface seems to breathe out the day's stored coolness. You can let your attention rest there, at the base of the quartz sandstone, where the strange towers no longer need to be explained. Their cracks are dark now, their ledges are quiet, their green crowns fade into the dim upper air, and the mist begins to return, rising from the valley like a slow thought that does not ask to be followed. The stream moves beside us with its small, patient voice. It carries grains too tiny to notice, fragments of old pillar and old rain, moving through the shadow without hurry. Above it, the stone remains still, though it is always changing, and the forest keeps its place in the damp folds of the ravine. Nothing here is finished, and nothing here is urgent. As night deepens, Wulingyuan becomes less a view than a presence. The pillars stand partly hidden, their tops dissolving into cloud, their bases wrapped in moss, soil, and leaves. The air smells of wet sandstone and green shade. A drop falls somewhere high above, touches a ledge, pauses, and continues down through darkness. You are not trying to see all of it now. You are simply resting inside it. The strange stone forest can remain half-veiled. The ancient sand can remain inside the pillars. The water can keep its slow work in the cracks, and the mist can gather softly between the towers. The last light leaves the crowns. The ravine settles. The quartz pillars rise in silence above you, old and patient, while the stream goes on in the dark, carrying the smallest pieces of the mountain away, grain by grain.